Sometimes life forces your hand when those meant to protect you become the ones you need protection from. The day I discovered my college fund had been drained to fund my brother's failed business ventures, I made a choice that would fracture our family forever. But truth has a way of demanding its moment, no matter how painful. For most of my childhood, before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I lived in the shadow of my older brother, Eric. 3 years my senior, he was the gravitational center of our family. Charismatic, outgoing, and perpetually praised for potential that never quite materialized into achievement. My parents, Diane and Robert Turner, were middle-class suburbanites with prestigious aspirations. Dad worked as a regional manager for a retail chain, while Mom taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. They weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable and deeply invested in the narrative of Eric's inevitable success. I was different from the start, quieter, more analytical, consistently achieving without needing constant validation. My straight A's were expected rather than celebrated. My academic scholarships were acknowledged with brief nods, rather than the elaborate celebrations that accompanied Eric's sporadic accomplishments. It wasn't that my parents didn't love me, they simply viewed me as self-sufficient while Eric needed their constant support and attention. My mother would say, smoothing my hair with distracted affection. You've always been our rock. So independent. Eric just needs more guidance. That guidance had, over the years, taken the form of 5 different college attempts, 3 entrepreneurial ventures, and countless bailouts from financial misadventures. Meanwhile, I had worked methodically toward stability, putting myself through state university with a combination of scholarships and part-time jobs, choosing a practical degree in finance, and securing a solid position at a regional bank upon graduation. By 25, I had managed to save $35,000, a combination of graduation gifts from grandparents, disciplined monthly contributions from my salary, and a small inheritance from my father's aunt. This money was earmarked for a down payment on a modest home in our mid-sized Midwestern city, where I'd built a quiet but satisfying life. My parents had been named as co-signers on the account when I was 18. A remnant from when they'd helped establish my first savings account. I'd never thought to change this arrangement, trusting them implicitly with my financial security. Eric, now 28, had recently moved back home after his latest business idea, an artisanal coffee shop with a cryptocurrency investment component, had predictably imploded. My parents welcomed him with their usual mix of concern and unconditional support, converting their home office into a bedroom and assuring him that real success takes time. I maintained a cordial relationship with my brother, though we'd grown increasingly distant as our lives diverged. He viewed my stable career choices with thinly veiled dismissal, while I struggled to hide my frustration with his perpetual state of ambitious unproductivity. Last spring, I began seriously house hunting. The market was competitive, but not impossible, and I'd found a small craftsman-style home just 15 minutes from my office. It needed cosmetic updates but was structurally sound, perfect for a first-time buyer with moderate savings and a willingness to invest sweat equity. The asking price was reasonable at $175,000, and with my saved down payment of $35,000, my mortgage payments would be comfortably within my budget. When I called the listing agent to schedule a second viewing, she was ecstatic. You're just in time. The sellers received another offer this morning, but they've always preferred your vision for the home. If you can come in with your pre-approval and down payment confirmation today, I think we can make this happen. I called my bank immediately to arrange for the necessary documentation, buzzing with the nervous excitement of a significant life step. This would be my first home. Tangible proof of years of disciplined saving and careful planning. I'm afraid there's a problem with the account you're referencing, said Natalie, the customer service representative, her voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone delivering unwelcome news. The balance is currently $764.23. That's impossible, I replied, certain there had been a mistake. There should be just over $35,000 in that account. I made a deposit last Friday. Let me check the transaction history, Natalie said. The line filled with the sound of rapid typing. Yes, I see the deposit you mentioned. However, there was a substantial withdrawal made 3 days ago. $3,500 was transferred to another account. The world seemed to tilt sideways. I didn't authorize any withdrawal, I said, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. Who made this transfer? The withdrawal was authorized by Robert Turner, Natalie replied after a pause. As a co-signer, on the account, he has full withdrawal privileges. My father had emptied my savings account, the money I'd spent years accumulating, the future I'd been methodically building, without so much as a conversation. The betrayal was so enormous, so unexpected, that I couldn't immediately process. I need to see all the documentation for this transfer, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. And I need to speak with a manager about removing my parents as co-signers immediately. Of course, Natalie replied. The branch on Maple Street is open until 5 today. Ask for Kevin Donnelly. He's the senior manager. I'll note in the system that you'll be coming in. I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, unable to focus on anything except the gaping hole where my financial security had been just days before. A terrible suspicion began forming, one that connected my vanished savings with Eric's sudden announcement the previous weekend that he'd found investors for his newest business concept, a food truck specializing in globally inspired grilled cheese sandwiches. The drive to my parents' house was a blur. When I arrived, my mother's car was in the driveway, but my father would still be at work. This wasn't a confrontation I'd planned, but the urgency of the situation propelled me forward with uncharacteristic boldness. Mom answered the door in gardening clothes, soil staining the knees of her jeans. Her smile faltered as she registered my expression. Sabrina, aren't you supposed to be at work, honey? Where's my money, Mom? The question came out low and direct, stripped of the carefully diplomatic tone I typically used with my parents. Her face did everything but speak the truth. Eyes, widening in momentary shock, then narrowing in defensiveness, cheeks flushing with what might have been shame or anger. She stepped back from the door, gesturing me inside with a forced casualness that confirmed my suspicions more thoroughly than words could have. I'm not sure what you're talking about, she said, leading me into the kitchen where she busied herself with the kettle. Tea? I'm talking about the $4,500 Dad withdrew from my account 3 days ago, I said, remaining standing as she performed the ritual of tea preparation with shaking hands. The money I've been saving for 7 years, the down payment for my house. Where is it? The kettle whistled, a piercing sound that filled the silence between us. Mom took her time turning off the burner, pouring water into a single mug, though I'd declined her offer. Your father and I have always done what's best for this family, she said finally, her back still turned to me. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions. Stealing isn't a difficult decision, Mom. It's a crime. The words felt sharp in my mouth, foreign and necessary. She turned then, her expression hardening into something I recognized from childhood confrontations. The immovable authority that had always silenced my objections and redirected attention to Eric's needs. Don't be dramatic, Sabrina. It's not stealing when it's family. Your name is on the account, but it's always been a family resource. Right now, Eric needs that resource more than you do. The casual dismissal of my years of work, of my dreams and plans, landed like a physical blow. You gave my savings to Eric? For another business scheme that will fail like all the others? Your brother has a real chance this time, she said, her voice taking on the familiar defensive enthusiasm she reserved for discussions of Eric's potential. The food truck market is expanding rapidly, and his concept is unique. The investors, were very impressed. But he needed to show significant personal investment to secure their participation. So you stole my money to make it look like he had personal savings he doesn't have? The pieces clicked into terrible place. You've used my money to lie to actual investors? We borrowed it, Mom corrected, her fingers white around her. Mine, once the business is established, of course we'll pay you back, with interest. But you've always been so responsible, so stable. You can postpone buying a house for a year or two. Eric needs this chance now. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The kitchen I'd grown up in suddenly felt like alien territory. The woman before me, with her familiar gestures and expressions, seemed like a stranger wearing my mother's face. The fundamental unfairness of it all, that my brother's impulsivity was once again being rewarded while my stability was being punished, crystallized into a cold clarity I'd never experienced before. I'm going to the bank, I said, turning toward the door. I'm removing both you and Dad as co-signers on my accounts today, and if my money isn't returned by the end of the week, I'll be filing a police report for theft. Mom's mug clattered against the counter. You wouldn't. We're your parents, Sabrina. This is your brother's future we're talking about. And it was my future you stole, I replied, the calm in my voice surprising even me. I trusted you both, and you betrayed that trust without a second thought. If the situations were reversed, would you have taken Eric's money to help me? Her silence was enough. I left without looking back, the weight of this new reality settling over me like a heavy cloak. The family I thought I had, imperfect but ultimately loving, had been revealed as something else entirely. I was, in their eyes, not a daughter, to be cherished, but a resource to be mined for Eric's benefit. And now I needed to decide what to do with this devastating knowledge. My relationship with money had always been shaped by watching my parents' financial struggles and triumphs. Growing up in Lakeside, a suburb that straddled the line between middle-class comfort and upper-middle-class aspiration, meant constantly navigating the tension between what we had and what we wanted others to think we had. Dad's position at Meridian Retail gave us stability, but not luxury. Mom's teaching salary provided the extras, summer camps, occasional family vacations to nearby states, and Christmas mornings that never felt sparse. They worked hard, budgeted carefully, and instilled in me the value of financial responsibility from an early age. Or so I thought. In reality, they had been teaching me two contradictory lessons, one for me and one for Eric. While I was encouraged to save birthday money, work summer jobs, and apply for scholarships, Eric was taught that family would always provide a safety net. His financial education consisted of learning that mistakes would be forgiven, debts would be covered, and new opportunities would always be funded, regardless of past failures. Your brother has big dreams, Dad would explain after each bailout. Sometimes big dreamers need a little help along the way. No one ever mentioned that this help often came at my expense. Canceled family vacations when Eric needed tuition for yet another college program he wouldn't complete. Postponed home repairs when his first business needed startup capital. Tense discussions about household budgets that somehow never affected his lifestyle. I had accepted this dynamic, even as I built my own financial independence. After graduating with honors in finance from the state university, I'd secured a position at Riverside Financial, a mid-sized bank with a growing reputation for excellence. Starting in customer service, I'd worked my way to a junior analyst position, earning the respect of colleagues and supervisors through consistent performance and reliability. My apartment was modest, a one-bedroom in a 1960s building with decent maintenance and reasonable rent. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, paid for with my own earnings. I drove a used Honda with excellent gas mileage, packed lunches most days, and tracked my expenses with meticulous attention. My colleagues sometimes teased me about my frugality, but there was respect beneath their gentle ribbing. Sabrina's going to retire at 40, while the rest of us are still paying off our designer handbags, my friend Zoe would joke during happy hours that I attended, but kept to a 2-drink maximum. My savings strategy wasn't flashy. Every month, I automatically transferred 30% of my paycheck to my savings account, the same one my parents had helped me open when I was 18. I had considered opening a new account solely in my name several times, but always dismissed the idea as unnecessary. Paperwork. My parents had never interfered with my finances before. They'd always respected the boundary between guidance and control. Family dinners at the Turner house maintained a veneer of normalcy that I now recognize as carefully choreographed illusion. Sunday roasts and holiday gatherings where Dad carved the meat, Mom prepared side dishes from recipes passed down through generations, and conversation flowed around Eric's latest ventures. I would provide updates on my career progress when asked, but those inquiries were perfunctory, quickly redirected to more exciting topics. "That's wonderful that you got that certification, honey," Mom would say before immediately turning to my brother. "Eric, tell everyone about the potential investors you met last week." I had interpreted this as typical family dynamics. The quiet, reliable daughter overshadowed by the charismatic, troubled son. It's a story as old as families themselves. What I hadn't realized was how deeply this narrative had entrenched itself in my parents' financial decisions, or how it would ultimately impact my own carefully constructed plans. When Eric announced his latest business idea at a family dinner 2 months ago, I noticed a change in my parents' response. Rather than their usual cautious enthusiasm tempered by previous failures, they seemed genuinely excited, exchanging looks I couldn't quite interpret. "A gourmet grilled cheese food truck," Eric explained, gesturing expansively as though mapping out his empire. "But with global influences, Japanese ingredients, Indian spices, Mediterranean flavors. Street food elevated but still accessible." "What makes this different from your other ventures?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral rather than skeptical. Eric grinned, unfazed by the implied criticism. "I've done my research this time, Sabrina. The food truck market in this area is growing by 15% annually. Overhead is low compared to a brick-and-mortar restaurant, and I've been developing recipes for months." My parents nodded along, Dad clapping Eric on the shoulder with palpable pride. "Your brother's been very methodical about this one. He's even taking a small business management course at the community college." This was new. Eric usually disdained formal education after his multiple failed college attempts, preferring to rely on what he called real-world experience and entrepreneurial instinct. "I've already identified ideal locations, researched permit requirements, and started conversations with potential investors," Eric continued. "I just need to finalize my business plan and secure the initial capital. The truck itself is the biggest expense. A good used one with the right equipment runs about $30,000. The figure made me flinch inwardly, thinking of how close it was to my own savings. But I pushed the thought away, assuming Eric was pursuing bank loans or crowdfunding like most startup food businesses. "How are you financing it?" I asked, genuinely curious about his approach. "Still working out the details," he replied vaguely, sharing another of those meaningful glances with our parents. "But I've got some promising leads." What I didn't know then was that I was the promising lead, or rather my savings account was. The money I'd been accumulating through years of careful budgeting and intentional sacrifice had already been earmarked for Eric's food truck in my parents' minds. The account that represented my future home, my security, and my independence had been mentally reassigned without my knowledge or consent. The following weeks had been filled with house hunting, excitement. I'd toured numerous properties, learning the market and refining my priorities. The Craftsman house on Elm Street wasn't perfect. The kitchen needed updating. The bathroom was charmingly retro in a way that would eventually require renovation, and the backyard needed significant landscaping work. But it had good bones. As they say, hardwood floors beneath worn carpet, solid construction, and a layout that maximized the modest square footage. When the listing agent, Heather, called to say another offer had come in, my plans accelerated. I'd been pre-approved for a mortgage with Riverside, my own employer, receiving a slight employee discount on the interest rate. The down payment was substantial enough to keep my monthly payments manageable, while still leaving some savings for immediate repairs and emergencies. Everything was falling into place, or so I thought. The pieces of my carefully constructed adult life were aligning: career progression on track, financial stability established, and home ownership within reach. The future I'd been diligently working toward for years was finally materializing. What I couldn't see was that while I was building toward independence, my family was undermining it. The parents I trusted were viewing my success not as something to protect, but as a resource to redirect. The brother whose dreams always seemed to supersede mine was once again being positioned to benefit from my stability. The perfect illusion of family support was about to shatter completely, revealing a reality I wasn't prepared to face. In the Turner family economy, my achievements existed primarily to underwrite Eric's aspirations. My savings wasn't really mine. It was a family fund waiting to be appropriated for the golden child's next venture. As I drove away from my childhood home after confronting my mother, the true scope of this betrayal began to crystallize. This wasn't just about $35,000, significant as that sum was. It was about a lifetime of being valued differently, of watching my contributions to family welfare being taken for granted, while Eric's potential was endlessly celebrated and financed. The bank branch on Maple Street represented more than just the location of my compromised savings account. It would be the place where I'd finally stand up for myself, where I'd demand recognition, not just of the theft, but of the pattern it represented. Kevin Donnelly, the senior manager Natalie had mentioned, would become an unwitting witness to the dismantling of the Turner family mythology. The story of the reliable daughter and the promising son that had shaped our dynamics for decades. What I didn't yet know was how this confrontation would reshape not just my financial future, but my understanding of family itself, and how the boundaries I established that day would ultimately benefit everyone involved, even those who initially viewed them as betrayal. The bank lobby of Riverside Financial's Maple Street branch had always felt like a second home. I'd spent countless lunch breaks there handling personal transactions, knew most of the tellers by name, and had occasionally helped elderly customers navigate the ATM while waiting in line. But that Wednesday afternoon, the familiar space felt alien, the polished marble floors too slick, the ambient lighting too harsh, the hushed professional conversations too loud in my hypersensitive state. "Ms. Turner, Kevin Donnelly is ready to see you now." The receptionist's voice pulled me from my spiraling thoughts. Kevin's office was tucked in the back corner of the branch, glass-walled but with privacy blinds that could be drawn for sensitive conversations. He rose as I entered, extending his hand with professional warmth. In his mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses perched on his nose, he projected the exact blend of authority and approachability that made for an effective bank manager. "Sabrina, good to see you, though I understand this isn't under the best circumstances." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Natalie mentioned there's an issue with your savings account?" "Someone emptied my account without my knowledge or permission," I said, settling into the chair and placing my bag beside me. "I need to understand exactly what happened and what my options are." Kevin nodded, turning to his computer screen. "Let me pull up your account information." His fingers moved efficiently over the keyboard, his expression professionally neutral until he accessed the relevant records. Then I saw it, a flicker of surprise quickly masked. "I see the transaction you're referring to. A wire transfer of $3,500 to an external account, authorized by Robert Turner." "My father," I confirmed, my voice steadier than I expected. "He's a co-signer on the account. It was set up that way when I was 18. But he made this transfer without consulting me, and I need to know if there's any way to reverse it." Kevin leaned back slightly, considering his words carefully. Co-signers on an account have equal legal access to the funds, Sabrina. From a strictly banking perspective, your father had the authority to make that transaction. My heart sank, though this merely confirmed what I had suspected. So, there's nothing I can do? I didn't say that. Kevin reached for a notepad. Let's start by gathering all the facts. When did you last access this account yourself? Last Friday. I made a $500 deposit, my monthly contribution from my paycheck. And when did you discover the withdrawal? About 2 hours ago when I called to arrange documentation for a home purchase. Kevin's pen paused. I'm sorry to hear that. I know how hard you've been working toward home ownership. This wasn't just professional sympathy. Kevin had helped me set up a separate house fund within my savings account last year, offering advice on maximizing interest while maintaining liquidity for an eventual down payment. I need to see the exact documentation for the transfer, said. Where the money went, who authorized it, and all associated paperwork. Kevin typed again, then swiveled his screen so I could see it. The transfer was made to an account at First National, authorized in person by Robert Turner. He provided appropriate identification and used the correct security protocols. He clicked through several screens. He indicated the purpose as family business investment on the transfer form. Family business investment, the sanitized banking term for stealing my house deposit to fund Eric's grilled cheese truck fantasy. Can I get printed copies of all these records? Of course. Kevin hit print, then folded his hands on the desk. Sabrina, may I ask if you've spoken with your father about this? I spoke with my mother. She confirmed they took the money to invest in my brother's new business venture, without asking me, without even telling me. Kevin's professional mask slipped momentarily, revealing genuine concern. I see. And do you want to pursue recovery of these funds? Yes. The certainty in my voice surprised even me. I want my money back. Then there are several routes we could take. Kevin reached for a folder in his desk drawer. Since your father is a legal co-signer, this isn't technically bank fraud from our perspective. However, if you believe the funds were appropriated under false pretenses or against previously established agreements, you could pursue civil action. Civil action, suing my own parents. The concept should have been unthinkable, yet here I was, calmly discussing it with my bank manager. First, though, Kevin continued, I'd suggest removing your parents as co-signers on any remaining accounts to prevent further withdrawals. We can do that immediately. Yes, please. I reached for my wallet, extracting my ID. And I want to open a new account solely in my name to transfer whatever remains in the original account. Kevin nodded, reaching for a new account application form. As he began the paperwork, a notification sounded on his computer. He glanced at the screen, then back at me, his expression subtly changing. It appears there's been another development with your account. He turned the monitor so I could see. A second transfer was attempted 15 minutes ago, another $500 withdrawal, again by Robert Turner. My stomach clenched. Attempted? Yes, it was flagged by our system because it would have brought the account below the minimum balance requirement. The transaction is pending approval from a manager. He looked at me directly. As the primary account holder, would you like to approve or deny this transaction? The realization hit me like a physical blow. They were going to take it all. The initial $4,500 hadn't been enough. Now they were coming back for the meager remainder. This wasn't a one-time desperate measure. It was the beginning of a complete financial draining. Deny it, I said, my voice hardening. And please expedite removing them from my accounts. Kevin nodded, typing quickly to reject the transaction. I'll process this as urgent. In the meantime, he hesitated, then reached into his desk drawer, extracting a business card. This is Vanessa Lopez. She's an attorney who specializes in financial disputes, including family financial situations. I can't officially recommend legal action, but if you're considering that route, she's excellent. I took the card, noticing it had Kevin's personal cell number handwritten on the back. This went beyond professional banking assistance. It was human recognition of the betrayal I was experiencing. As Kevin processed the paperwork to secure what remained of my finances, I felt a strange calm settling over me. The shock was receding, replaced by clarity and purpose. I was going to fight for my money, not just because of the amount, substantial as it was, but because of what it represented. "There's one more thing," I said as Kevin finished the forms. "I need records of all account activity for the past year, including any inquiries or unsuccessful access attempts." Kevin looked up, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You think this might have been planned for some time?" "I think I need to know exactly when my parents started viewing my savings as available funds for my brother's use." He nodded, typing rapidly. "I'll have that for you momentarily." The printer behind his desk whirred to life, producing several pages of account activity logs. Kevin collected them, scanning briefly before passing them to me. "There," he said, pointing to an IA. "Entry dated 3 months earlier. It appears there was an account balance inquiry from your father on February 12th, and another on March 5th. The withdrawal didn't happen until this week, but they were checking your balance well before that. 3 months. While I was working, overtime, contributing faithfully to my savings, and beginning to house hunt, my parents had already been eyeing my account as a solution to Eric's financial needs. The betrayal wasn't impulsive. It was calculated, deliberate, and premeditated." As I studied the documents, another entry caught my eye. "What's this failed transfer attempt from 2 weeks ago?" Kevin peered at the record I was indicating. "It appears your father attempted a smaller withdrawal, $5,000, but the transaction was canceled before completion." "By whom?" "By the initiator. Your father started the process but didn't complete it." A test run, I realized, or perhaps a moment of conscience quickly overcome by Eric's needs. "There's something else you should see," Kevin said, pulling up another screen. "Your savings account isn't the only one they have access to." He showed me a list of accounts associated with my Social Security number. "You have a secondary checking account and an investment account they're also co-signed on." My heart sank further. The checking account was minimal, my fun money that rarely exceeded $1,000, but the investment account contained stock gifts from my grandparents and the modest portfolio I'd been building since college. Not as substantial as my house fund, but still representing years of disciplined investing. "We need to secure those immediately," I said, fighting to keep my voice level. Kevin was already typing. "I'm placing temporary holds on both accounts pending formal removal of the cosigners. We'll need to complete separate paperwork for each, but this will prevent any withdrawals for the next 48 hours. As I watched him implement these protections, a new notification appeared on his screen. Kevin stilled, his expression shifting to something I couldn't quite read. "Your father is currently at the First Street branch," he said quietly. "He's attempting to liquidate your investment account." The timing couldn't be coincidence. My mother must have called my father immediately after our confrontation, warning him that I'd discovered the initial theft. Rather than returning my money, they were accelerating their appropriation of my assets. "Can you stop it?" My voice had fallen to a whisper. "I already have," Kevin confirmed. "The hold is in place. The branch manager is informing him now that the transaction cannot be processed." I could picture my father's face, the authority figure of my childhood, the man whose approval I'd sought through years of academic achievement and financial responsibility, reddening with frustration as he was denied access to my investments. Would he feel shame, anger, entitlement? I couldn't predict anymore. The father I thought I knew wouldn't have stolen from me in the first place. When will the co-signer removal be complete? I asked, gathering the printed records into my bag. I'll process it personally within the hour, Kevin promised. Though I should warn you, your parents will receive automatic notification once they're removed from the accounts. Another confrontation was inevitable then. There would be no quiet resolution, no way to protect what remained of my assets, without my parents knowing I had discovered their betrayal and taken action. Thank you for your help, I said, standing to leave, and for the attorney recommendation. I think I'm going to need it. Kevin rose as well, extending his hand again. As we shook, he said quietly, "For what it's worth, Sabrina, I've observed your financial habits for years now. Your discipline and foresight are remarkable. Don't let this setback derail the future you've been building so carefully." His words steadied me, a professional affirmation of what I'd always believed about myself, that my approach to finances wasn't just about accumulating money, but about creating security and possibilities. What my parents had stolen wasn't just cash. It was the foundation of the independent life I'd been constructing. As I left Kevin's office, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. My father's name flashed on the screen. I silenced it, knowing that conversation required preparation and strength I didn't yet possess. First, I needed to fully understand what I was facing and what options remained available to me. The revelation wasn't just that my parents had taken my money, it was that they had been planning to do so for months, had attempted to take even more when confronted, and would have continued draining my resources if not stopped. The family dynamic I'd accepted all my life, the reliable daughter supporting the volatile son, had evolved from emotional inequity to financial exploitation. As I drove away from the bank, my phone continued to light up with calls from both parents. I ignored them all, focusing instead on the road ahead, both literally and figuratively. The path forward wasn't clear yet, but one thing was certain. The illusion of family support had been irrevocably shattered, replaced by the harsh reality of betrayal that demanded response. By the time I reached my apartment, my phone had accumulated 17 missed calls, 12 from my father, 5 from my mother, and a flurry of text messages ranging from demanding to pleading. I silenced the device completely, needing space to think without their intrusions. My small living room, with its carefully selected second-hand furniture and precisely arranged bookshelves, had always been my sanctuary. Now it felt like the last, secure space in the world suddenly turned hostile. I laid out the bank documents on my coffee table, creating a timeline of events that was more damning with each piece I added. The balance inquiries from February and March, the canceled withdrawal, attempt 2 weeks ago, the successful transfer of $4,500 3 days earlier, today's attempted withdrawal of the remaining $500, the thwarted liquidation of my investment account just hours ago. This wasn't an impulsive decision or a one-time emergency measure. This was a calculated, escalating campaign to systematically strip me of my assets for Eric's benefit. And it would have continued if I hadn't happened to call about my house purchase exactly when I did. The house. I needed to contact Heather, the real estate agent, and explain that I couldn't proceed with the purchase. That call could wait until morning, but another couldn't. Vanessa Lopez, the attorney Kevin had recommended. Her business card indicated she maintained evening hours on Wednesdays, and the clock showed just past 5. If I called immediately, I might catch her. Her receptionist answered on the third ring. "Lopez Legal Solutions. How may I help you?" "My name is Sabrina Turner." Kevin Donnelly from Riverside Financial suggested I speak with Ms. Lopez about a family financial dispute. It's somewhat urgent. Ms. Lopez has just finished with a client. If you can hold it for a moment, I'll see if she can speak with you. Briefly. The line filled with generic hold music for less than a minute before a direct, professional female voice came on. "This is Vanessa Lopez. Kevin Donnelly referred you?" "Yes." My parents withdrew nearly all my savings without my knowledge or permission, and they attempted to liquidate my investments today when I confronted them. Kevin helped me secure my remaining assets, but I need to understand my options for recovering what was taken. There was a brief pause. I have 30 minutes before my next appointment. Can you come to my office now? I'm at 247 Carson Avenue, Suite 310. I'll be there in 15 minutes, I promised, already reaching for my car keys. Vanessa Lopez's office projected competence without ostentation, modern furnishings in neutral tones, discreet diplomas from prestigious institutions, and a wall of legal reference books that appeared well-used rather than decorative. The attorney herself matched her surroundings. Mid-40s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Tell me exactly what happened," she said after brief introductions, foregoing small talk entirely. I laid out the events chronologically, from the discovery of the missing funds to Kevin's interventions at the bank. I explained my parents' co-signer status on the accounts, their justification that the money was for Eric's food truck business, and their multiple attempts to access my remaining assets after the initial confrontation. Vanessa took rapid notes, interrupting occasionally with precise questions about dates, amounts, and specific statements made by my parents. When I described my mother's assertion that my money was a family resource, her pen paused momentarily, and she looked up with heightened interest. Did she elaborate on what she meant by family resource? She said it wasn't stealing because it was family, and that the account had always been intended for family use even though it was in my name. Were there ever any discussions when the account was established about it being for general family use? No, I said firmly. It was created as my personal savings account. My parents were added as co-signers because I was 18 and they thought I needed supervision with banking. There was never any agreement that they could use the funds themselves or for my brother. Vanessa made another note. And what documentation do you have regarding the source of these funds? I opened my bag, retrieving a folder I'd assembled before leaving my apartment. I have records of my direct deposits from work, documentation of the inheritance from my great-aunt that specified the funds were for me personally, and statements showing consistent deposits from my own earnings over 7 years. She examined these documents, nodding with apparent approval at my organization. This is helpful. The key issue here is proving that despite the co-signer arrangement, these funds were understood to be exclusively yours, that there was no explicit or implicit agreement that your parents could appropriate them for other family members. There wasn't, I confirmed. Until yesterday, they'd never withdrawn anything from my accounts without my knowledge. The fact that they checked balances for months before acting suggests premeditation, which works in our favor. Vanessa flipped to a new page in her notebook. Let's discuss your options. From a legal perspective, you could pursue this as conversion, the legal term for when someone takes your property and uses it for their own purposes without permission. Would I need to file criminal charges? The thought of my parents facing arrest still felt extreme despite everything. Not necessarily. This could be handled as a civil matter, especially given the family relationship and co-signer status. We would file a civil suit demanding return of the funds plus damages. Damages? Yes. The loss of these funds has tangible consequences. You mentioned losing a house opportunity, potentially paying higher interest rates in the future due to a smaller down payment, and so on. These are quantifiable damages. I considered this, trying to imagine sitting in a courtroom across from my parents, watching them defend their right to take my savings. The scenario felt simultaneously vindicating and heartbreaking. What's the likelihood of success? I asked. It depends on several factors. The fact that they were legal co-signers complicates matters, but doesn't make recovery impossible. Their statements about your money being a family resource without prior agreement weakens their position. The escalating pattern of withdrawals suggests they knew you wouldn't approve, which further undermines any claim that this was an authorized use of funds. She tapped her pen thoughtfully. Before proceeding with litigation, however, I'd recommend a formal demand letter. What would that entail? I would send an official legal communication outlining the facts of the situation, the legal basis for your claim, and a clear demand for return of the funds by a specific date. It establishes that you're serious about pursuing this matter and often prompts resolution without court involvement. And if they ignore it? Then we proceed with filing a civil case. Vanessa leaned forward slightly. Sabrina, I should warn you that family financial disputes are rarely just about money. They tend to expose and exacerbate underlying relationship dynamics. Are you prepared for potential estrangement from your parents over this? The question landed heavily. Was I? The betrayal had already fundamentally altered how I viewed my family. Could that relationship be salvaged regardless of how this financial matter resolved? I wasn't sure. I need to stand up for myself, I said finally. If that damages our relationship, then it was already built on a foundation that couldn't last. Vanessa nodded, seemingly satisfied with my response. There's another angle we should consider. You mentioned your brother's business venture, a food truck he's seeking investors for? Yes, that's what they took the money for, to show he had personal investment capital to attract other investors. If your parents represented these funds as your brother's personal investment to third parties, that potentially constitutes fraud against those investors. They're being misled about your brother's financial stake and commitment. This perspective hadn't occurred to me. So there could be legal issues beyond just my parents taking my money? Potentially, yes. If other people invest based on misrepresentations about your brother's personal financial commitment, they could have their own claims against him and possibly your parents as facilitators. Vanessa made another note. Do you know who these potential investors are? No, but I could probably find out. Eric tends to post about his business ventures on social media. That information might be useful leverage in our demand letter. Your parents may be more responsive if they understand this isn't just about returning your money. It's about preventing potential fraud charges related to investor misrepresentation. The stakes were escalating beyond what I'd initially imagined. This wasn't just about recovering my savings. It was about stopping a potentially fraudulent investment scheme before others were harmed. The realization added moral weight to my pursuit. What do I do about their attempts to contact me? I asked, thinking of my silenced phone. They've been calling and texting constantly since the bank notified them about the account changes. Limited, documented communication is best. I'd suggest sending a single text message stating that you're pursuing legal counsel regarding the unauthorized withdrawal of your funds and that all further communication should go through your attorney. Vanessa handed me her business card. Include my contact information. This establishes boundaries and prevents them from trying to manipulate you directly. I nodded, tucking the card carefully into my wallet. And what about my brother? He's been calling too. Same approach. Unless you have reason to believe he wasn't aware of where this money came from? I considered this. I'm not certain what he knows. My mother indicated they presented it as a family decision to support his business, but I don't know if they explicitly told him they took it from my account without permission. Then I'd maintain the same boundary with him until we clarify his involvement. If he was complicit in appropriating your funds knowing they weren't willingly given, he's part of the problem. If he was misled about the source, that's a separate conversation for later. This felt like the right approach. Clear boundaries while I gathered more information and pursued legal remedies. I had spent years being the accommodating daughter, the one who didn't make waves, who accepted the family's prioritization of Eric's needs. That pattern couldn't continue if I wanted to rebuild my financial security and self-respect. What should I do next? I asked, feeling more centered than I had since discovering the theft. I'll draft a demand letter immediately, Vanessa said. checking her calendar. I can have it ready for review by tomorrow afternoon. In the meantime, I suggest you document everything. Gather all financial records showing the source of these funds, any communications with your parents about the money before and after the withdrawal, and any evidence regarding how the funds are being used for your brother's business. I'll start tonight, I promised. Also, secure any other assets or accounts they might have access to. Not just financial accounts, but things like shared storage units, safe deposit boxes, or valuable possessions kept at their home. I hadn't considered this angle. My grandmother's jewelry is still at their house in my old bedroom closet, and some savings bonds my grandfather gave me. Retrieve those as soon as possible, preferably with a neutral third party present too. Witness. Don't go alone, and don't go when only one parent is home. Having a witness reduces the risk of confrontation and provides documentation of what you removed and when. The pragmatic advice helped channel my emotional turmoil into concrete action steps. I had always responded to crisis by organizing, planning, and methodically addressing problems. This situation, though more personal and painful than any I'd faced before, could be approached with the same strategic mindset. One last question, I said, as our time drew to a close. What are the chances they've already spent the money on Eric's food truck? And if they have, what then? Vanessa's expression turned more serious. If the funds are already spent, recovery becomes more complicated, but not impossible. We could potentially place a lien against your brother's business assets or pursue garnishment of your parents' wages or retirement accounts. However, these options take longer and may recover less than the full amount. The thought of my parents' retirement being garnished to repay me created a fresh wave of complex emotions. I didn't want to harm their future security, but they had shown no such concern for mine. Let's focus first on recovering the funds directly, Vanessa suggested, sensing my discomfort. The demand letter often works, especially when people realize the consequences of their actions extend beyond family disagreement into legal liability. I nodded, gathering my documents. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. This has been clarifying. Financial betrayal by family is particularly devastating because it combines practical harm with emotional trauma, Vanessa said, her professional demeanor softening slightly. Don't underestimate the emotional impact of this situation. Consider speaking with a therapist as you navigate the legal process. This suggestion surprised me, but made sense upon reflection. The practical aspects of recovering my money could be handled systematically, but the fracturing of trust in my family, trust I'd never questioned until today, would require different tools to process. As I left Vanessa's office, I checked my phone briefly, finding 23 more missed calls and a series of increasingly urgent text messages. Dad, 5:15 p.m. Call me immediately. There's been a misunderstanding about your accounts. Mom, 5:22 p.m. Sabrina, please don't do anything. Rash, we need to talk as a family. Dad, 5:40 p.m. The bank is saying you've removed us from your accounts. This is unacceptable. Eric, 6:02 p.m. Hey sis, what's going on? Mom and Dad are freaking out about something with the bank. Mom, 6:15 p.m. Your father is very upset. This is no way to handle a family matter. Dad, 6:30 p.m. If you don't call back within the hour, we're coming to your apartment. The last message sent a chill through me. I didn't want a confrontation at my home, my one safe space in this chaos. Following Vanessa's advice, I composed a single text message to send to both parents. I am aware that $34,500 was withdrawn from my savings account without my knowledge or permission. I have secured legal representation to address this matter. Please direct all communication to my attorney, Vanessa Lopez, at Lopez Legal Solutions. I will not be discussing this with you directly at this time. I added Vanessa's contact information and hit send, then composed a similar but more limited message to Eric. I'm dealing with a serious situation involving unauthorized withdrawals from my accounts. I can't discuss it right now. Please respect my space and don't come to my apartment. With these boundaries established, I turned my phone to Do Not Disturb mode, allowing calls only from contacts not in my family, my boss, close friends, Vanessa's office. Then I began the systematic process of documenting everything related to my savings and the theft, creating a chronological file that would support the demand letter and potential litigation. As I worked, a sense of calm purpose replaced the earlier shock and betrayal. This methodical response was familiar territory, problem-solving through organization and strategic planning. My parents had always viewed my meticulous nature as merely practical, never recognizing the emotional strength it represented. They had mistaken my reliability for passivity, my independence for detachment, my quiet determination for lack of passion. That misunderstanding had led them to believe I would accept this theft, as I had accepted so many smaller injustices throughout my life, with resigned accommodation to Eric's needs. They hadn't recognized that the same disciplined persistence that built my savings would now be directed toward recovering it. By midnight, I had assembled a comprehensive documentation package, bank statements showing regular deposits from my own earnings, the inheritance letter from my great-aunt specifically naming me as beneficiary, employment records confirming my salary and the source of my savings, and preliminary research on Eric's food truck business plans from his social media accounts. Tomorrow, I would meet with Heather to withdraw from the house purchase, retrieve my valuables from my parents' home with a friend as witness, and review Vanessa's demand letter. The path to recovering my money wouldn't be short or simple, but I had never shied away from complex problems requiring sustained effort. As I finally prepared for bed, my phone screen lit up with a text that had bypassed my Do Not Disturb settings. My friend Zoe, who wasn't part of my blocked family group. "Hey, your brother just called me asking where you are and if you're okay. Said your parents are worried. What's going on? Do you need anything?" So they were now involving my friends in their attempts to reach me. The boundary violations continued, expanding to include my social circle. I replied quickly, "Family, financial situation gone bad. I'm safe, but need space. If anyone from my family contacts you, please don't share info about me. We'll explain everything soon. Thanks for having my back." Zoe's response came immediately. "Always. Want me to come over? Not tonight, but tomorrow. I need to pick up some things from my parents' house and shouldn't go alone. Say when. I'll bring coffee and my don't mess with my friend face." The simple offer of support brought the day's first genuine smile to my face. While my family had betrayed my trust, I wasn't truly alone. I had built connections beyond that first circle, friends, colleagues, and now professional allies who recognized my worth and supported my right to protect it. As I finally fell into bed, exhaustion overtaking the adrenaline that had sustained me through this longest of days, a strange thought surfaced. In taking my money, my parents had inadvertently given me something valuable, the clarity to see our family dynamic for what it truly was, and the catalyst to change it. Whether that change led to eventual healing or permanent separation remained to be seen. But either way, I would no longer be the passive participant in my own story. Tomorrow would begin the process of reclaiming not just my savings, but my agency in the family narrative that had defined me for too long. Morning arrived with the harsh clarity that sometimes follows emotional upheaval, a strange, crystalline quality to ordinary things. My small kitchen, the coffee maker burbling its familiar rhythm, the sunlight slanting through blinds I'd selected myself, everything seemed sharper, more distinctly mine. I checked my phone cautiously. The expected barrage of messages had continued overnight. 14 texts and 11 missed calls. Most were from my parents, with increasing urgency and shifting emotional tactics. Anger giving way to concern, then to guilt, then back to indignation. 2 were from Eric, his tone confused rather than accusatory. "What's going on? Mom and Dad won't tell me exactly what happened with your money. Did they really take your savings? Call me." And then, sent at 2:14 a.m. "Whatever they did, I'm sorry. I didn't know." I couldn't process Eric's role in this situation yet. His claim of ignorance might be genuine, or it might be another manipulation in the family pattern. Either way, maintaining boundaries with all of them remained my priority. The most important notification wasn't a call or text, but an email from Vanessa Lopez, sent at 6:42 a.m. "Draft demand letter attached for your review. Can meet at 11 Bauer to discuss and finalize. Please confirm." I replied immediately, confirming the appointment, then opened the attachment. Reading Vanessa's formal, precise language describing my parents' actions was jarring. The emotional family drama translated into dispassionate legal terms. "This letter constitutes formal demand for the immediate return of $4,500 unlawfully, converted from Ms. Turner's savings account on April 17th. These funds, accumulated through Ms. Turner's personal earnings and designated inheritance, were withdrawn without authorization or consent and appropriated for purposes contrary to the account holder's interests." The document continued, outlining the timeline of withdrawals, the evidence of premeditation, and the potential consequences if the funds weren't returned within 5 business days, including civil litigation, potential fraud implications regarding investor misrepresentation, and the pursuit of additional damages related to my lost housing opportunity. Seeing my personal betrayal articulated as a legal case transformed something inside me. What my parents had done wasn't just a family disagreement or a misunderstanding about shared resources. It was conversion, a civil wrong with specific remedies under law. My hurt feelings weren't just emotional sensitivity. They were the natural response to an actionable offense. This reframing shifted my perception of myself in this situation. I wasn't being difficult or ungenerous by demanding my money back. I wasn't betraying family loyalty by involving legal counsel. I was responding appropriately to a genuine injustice, one that would be recognized as such by objective third parties. As I prepared for my 9:00 a.m. meeting with Heather, the real estate agent, I chose my outfit with unusual deliberation. A tailored charcoal pantsuit I typically reserved for important presentations at work, paired with low heels and minimal jewelry. I needed to project composure and professionalism while explaining why I was withdrawing my offer on the house. Heather's office was decorated with framed photos of smiling clients holding house keys in front of their new homes, images of the milestone I'd been working toward before my parents' betrayal. I pushed aside the twinge of regret and focused on the practical matter at hand. "I'm afraid I need to withdraw my offer on the Elm Street property," I said after brief pleasantries. Heather's disappointment was evident but professional. "May I ask what changed?" The sellers were very close to accepting. "There's been an unexpected financial situation." I hesitated, then decided that a simplified version of the truth would be more convincing than a vague excuse. A significant portion of my down payment was withdrawn from my account without my authorization. I'm working to recover the funds, but that won't happen in time for this purchase. Heather's expression shifted from disappointment to concern. "I'm so sorry, Sabrina. That sounds extremely stressful." "It is. I'm handling it, but I won't be in a position to buy a house for at least several months, possibly longer." "I understand completely." She reached for a form on her desk. "I'll need you to sign this withdrawal notice. The earnest money you put down, $2,000, is fully refundable in these circumstances." As I signed the form, relinquishing the Craftsman house I'd already begun imagining as home, Heather added, "When you're ready to resume your search, I'd be happy to work with you again. The right house will still be waiting when your situation stabilizes." Her kindness nearly cracked my carefully maintained composure. I thanked her, promised to be in touch when I was ready to restart the process, and left with the refund check for my earnest money, a small financial recovery that felt hollow compared to what remained lost. In my car, I allowed myself exactly 3 minutes of grief for the postponed milestone before refocusing on the day's next task, retrieving my valuables from my parents' house. I called Zoe, confirming she could meet me there at 10:15 a.m. "Want to tell me what's going on?" She asked over the phone. "I'll explain everything on the way. It's not a quick story." I cleared my whole morning. "Whatever you need." I arrived at our meeting point, a coffee shop 2 blocks from my parents' house, 15 minutes early. The short wait gave me time to formulate exactly what I would say and do if my parents were home. I didn't want confrontation, but I needed to be prepared for it. Zoe arrived with her typical punctuality, sliding into the seat across from me with a concerned expression. "You look like you haven't slept. What happened?" I explained everything: the discovery of the missing funds, my mother's justification, the bank's interventions, and the legal process I'd initiated. Zoe's expression transformed from concern to outrage as I spoke. "They took your house fund for Eric's food truck? After all his failed businesses?" Her indignation was validating, an external confirmation that my reaction wasn't excessive. "And they're acting like you're the problem for being upset about it?" "Essentially, yes. I need to get my grandmother's jewelry and some other valuables from their house before they decide those are family resources, too." "Do you think they'd really take your grandmother's things?" I would have dismissed the possibility 3 days ago. Now, I wasn't sure of anything. "I don't know anymore. I just know I need to secure everything they might have access to." "What's the plan?" Zoe shifted into practical mode, something I'd always appreciated about her friendship. "We go together. I retrieve my things. You serve as witness. We leave without extended discussion. If they're not home, I still have my key. And if they are home, I state my purpose clearly, get my belongings, and leave. No debates, no emotional appeals, no accusations. Just in and out." Zoe nodded. "I'll run interference if needed. Ready?" The drive to my parents' house took less than 5 minutes, but my anxiety mounted with each block. Their driveway was empty when we arrived, a small mercy. My key still worked in the front door lock, though I felt like an intruder in the home where I'd grown up. The house was unnervingly normal: familiar furniture, family photos on the walls, many featuring Eric's achievements prominently, the lingering scent of my mother's favorite candles. Nothing in the physical space reflected the seismic shift in our relationship. "Let's be quick," I said to Zoe, leading the way upstairs to my old bedroom. The room had been partially converted to a home office after I moved out for college, but a section remained preserved with my high school memorabilia and personal items I hadn't taken to my apartment. I went directly to the closet, pushing aside hanging clothes to access the back corner where a locked box contained my grandmother's jewelry. The box was still there, untouched. I used the small key I kept on my personal key ring and opened it. To confirm the contents: my grandmother's pearl necklace, her wedding ring, left specifically to me in her will, and several other pieces with both monetary and sentimental value. Relief washed over me as I secured the box in my tote bag. Next, I located the folder containing my savings bonds in the desk drawer. 12 Series EE bonds my grandfather had purchased for me, one on each birthday until his death. Each was registered solely in my name, but they had always been kept in my parents' house for safekeeping. "Is this everything?" Zoe asked, watching the doorway vigilantly. "Almost." I moved to the bookshelf, retrieving a leather-bound journal from behind several textbooks. It contained handwritten financial records I'd kept since high school, documentation of gifts, inheritances, and personal savings that predated my digital record-keeping. The journal might provide additional evidence of my long-standing financial independence and the personal nature of my accumulated assets. I was placing this last item in my bag when we heard the front door open downstairs. My pulse spiked as my mother's voice called out, "Sabrina, is that you?" Zoe gave me a questioning look. I nodded, whispering, "We finish and leave calmly. No arguments." Footsteps ascended the stairs as we exited my bedroom. My mother appeared at the top of the staircase, her expression a complex mixture of relief and wariness. "Sabrina, thank God. We've been so worried." Her gaze shifted to Zoe, then to the bag in my hands, understanding dawning in her eyes. "What are you doing?" "I'm retrieving my personal belongings," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "We're leaving now." "We need to talk about this situation," my mother said, blocking the stairway slightly. "Your father and I've retained legal counsel, Mom. All communication needs to go through my attorney." I maintained eye contact, refusing to show the emotional turmoil beneath my composed exterior. "Legal counsel? Sabrina, this is family. We don't involve lawyers in family matters. You involved my money in Eric's business without my consent. That changed the rules." I gestured to the stairs. "Please, step aside." My mother didn't move. "The money is already committed to the food truck. The down payment has been made. Eric signed the purchase agreement yesterday." The revelation that my savings were already spent hit harder than I'd anticipated. Practical recovery had just become significantly more complicated. "That doesn't change anything," I said after a moment. "Taking my money without permission was wrong, whether you've spent it or not." "It was a loan," she insisted, her voice taking on the reasonable tone she'd used throughout my childhood when explaining why Eric's needs took precedence. "Once the business is successful, you'll be repaid with interest. A loan requires the lender's consent. I never consented." "Because you don't understand the opportunity Eric has. This business will transform his future and benefit the whole family." The familiar pattern was attempting to reassert itself, my mother explaining why Eric's potential justified sacrifices, particularly mine. In the past, I would have eventually acquiesced, accepting her framing of family priorities. But something fundamental had shifted in me. "Mom, I'm not discussing this further. Please move." When she remained in place, Zoe stepped forward. "Mrs. Turner, we're leaving now. You can make things difficult, or you can step aside, but Sabrina is walking out with her belongings either way." The intervention of an outsider, a witness to our family dysfunction, seemed to pierce my mother's certainty. She hesitated, then moved to the side, allowing us passage. As we descended the stairs, she followed, her tone shifting to emotional appeal. "Sabrina, please. You're tearing apart the family. Your father couldn't even go to work today. He's so upset about you." Involving a lawyer. I paused at the front door, turning to face her directly. "I didn't tear apart the family, Mom. You and Dad did that when you decided my financial security was less important than Eric's latest venture. I trusted you, and you betrayed that trust. We're your parents. Everything we've ever done has been for your benefit." "No," I interrupted, the word quiet but definitive. "Much of what you've done has been for Eric's benefit, often at my expense. I accepted that emotional imbalance for years, but I won't accept theft." My mother's face flushed. "It wasn't theft. You've always been so dramatic about taking. Someone's money without permission is theft, regardless of your relationship to them. The fact that you can't acknowledge that shows why legal intervention is necessary." I opened the door, stepping onto the porch with Zoe beside me. "The demand letter will arrive tomorrow. I suggest you and Dad read it carefully." As we walked to my car, my mother called after us. "Eric had nothing to do with this decision. Don't punish him for our mistake." I didn't respond or look back, but her words registered. This was the first acknowledgement, however indirect, that taking my money had been a mistake. It wasn't an apology or an offer of restitution, but it was a crack in the absolute righteousness they had initially projected. In the car, Zoe waited. until we had driven several blocks before speaking. That was intense. Are you okay? Not really, I admitted, the composed facade beginning to crack now that we were safely away. But I will be. Your mom trying to guilt you about tearing apart the family was classic manipulation. It's always worked before, I said quietly. I've always been the one who smooths things over, who accommodates, who doesn't make waves. What's different this time? I considered the question carefully, trying to identify the precise moment when my lifelong pattern of acquiescence had broken. I finally recognized that their behavior wasn't just unfair. It was wrong. Objectively, legally wrong. And continuing to accommodate it would make me complicit in my own mistreatment. Zoe nodded. Self-respect looks good on you, Sabrina. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. Her simple affirmation brought unexpected tears to my eyes, not of sadness but of recognition. I had spent so many years seeking approval and validation from parents who consistently prioritized my brother that this straightforward acknowledgement of my worth from a friend felt revolutionary. As we approached my apartment building, Zoe asked, "What's next?" "Meeting with my attorney at 11 to finalize the demand letter, then work this afternoon. I can't afford to take another day off, especially now." "Want me to come to the lawyer meeting?" "No, but thank you. I need to handle that part myself." Zoe squeezed my arm before I exited the car. "Call me tonight? Let me know how it goes?" "I will." I gathered my retrieved belongings, feeling their weight, both physical and symbolic. "Thanks for being my witness today." "Anytime. That's what friends are for, especially when family fails you." As I carried my grandmother's jewelry box and childhood financial records into my apartment, I felt a shift solidifying within me. The initial shock and betrayal were transforming into something else, a clear-eyed determination to establish new boundaries and expectations, to demand respect rather than hoping for it. The Sabrina who had trusted her parents implicitly with her financial security, who had accepted the role of reliable daughter who never required attention or advocacy, was gone. In her place was emerging someone stronger, someone willing to fight for herself with the same dedication she'd always shown in building her careful, stable life. This transformation wasn't just about recovering money, though that remained a practical necessity. It was about recognizing my own worth, not as the responsible one in relation to Eric's chaos, but as a person deserving of basic respect and honesty. It was about refusing to remain in a family system that functioned by exploiting my reliability and diminishing my needs. When I left for my meeting with Vanessa an hour later, I carried this new self-perception with me, a shield against the guilt and manipulation that had always pulled me back into damaging family patterns. For the first time, I was placing my own well-being at the center of my decisions, without apology or hesitation. The demand letter would be delivered tomorrow, marking the formal beginning of my stand against financial exploitation. But the true beginning had already occurred. In the moment I decided that my savings, my future, and my boundaries mattered enough to defend, regardless of the emotional cost or family fallout. I reviewed my professional documentation on the matter, updated my personal financial records, and practiced what I would say to my supervisor, Diane Myers, about the situation. Monday morning, I arrived at work 30 minutes early, requesting a brief meeting with Diane before our regular department check-in. Her office door was open, and she waved me in with her usual friendly efficiency. "Sabrina, good morning. What can I help you with?" "I need to make you aware of a personal situation that might affect the workplace," I began, maintaining my professional demeanor despite my discomfort. "My family has scheduled a business meeting here tomorrow without my knowledge, and it involves a financial matter that's currently under legal dispute." Diane's expression shifted from casual interest to focused concern. "I'm listening." I provided a concise, factual summary of the situation, the unauthorized withdrawal, my legal response, and the upcoming investors' meeting for Eric's food truck business. I emphasized that the funds being represented as Eric's business investment had been taken from my account without permission, potentially constituting fraud against any new investors. My attorney is notifying the bank's legal department today, I concluded. I wanted to ensure you heard this directly from me first, as it might create some awkward dynamics tomorrow. Diane leaned back in her chair, processing this information. I appreciate your transparency, Sabrina. This sounds like an extremely difficult personal situation. It is, but I'm handling it. My primary concern is maintaining professional boundaries while this resolves. Understandably. She made a quick note on her desk calendar. The small business investment meetings are typically held in Conference Room B on the second floor. They're organized through our commercial division, not directly connected to our department. This was a small relief. At least the meeting wouldn't be happening directly in my work area. Still, Diane continued, this creates a complex situation. Have you considered taking tomorrow off? Not because you've done anything wrong, she added quickly, but to give yourself some space from what might become an uncomfortable confrontation. I had considered it but dismissed the idea. I think it's important that I maintain my normal work routine. Taking the day off might be interpreted as hiding or being ashamed, when in fact, I'm the wronged party in this situation. Diane nodded, a hint of approval in her expression. I respect that approach. Let me check the schedule for tomorrow's meeting. She turned to her computer, typing briefly. Yes, here it is. Eric Turner, Global Melt LLC, meeting with Thomas from Commercial Lending and several external participants at 2 p.m. Thomas was our senior commercial lending officer, known for his meticulous approach to small business financing. He would definitely want to know about any potential issues with investment funds being presented. Riverside takes financial transparency very seriously, Diane said, her tone becoming more formal. I'll speak with Thomas directly after our legal department has been notified. Any misrepresentation of funds would typically result in immediate cancellation of such a meeting. That decision, that transformation from accommodating daughter to self-advocating individual, would prove more valuable in the long run than even the $35,000 I was fighting to recover. The demand letter went out Thursday morning by certified mail, requiring signature confirmation. According to Vanessa, my parents would likely receive it by Friday afternoon. The 5-day compliance period would begin upon delivery, giving them until the following Wednesday to return my money before further legal action commenced. I had expected this waiting period to feel paralyzing, but instead, I found myself unusually focused and productive. At work on Thursday and Friday, I channeled my emotional energy into completing a complex analysis project ahead of schedule, earning appreciative comments from my supervisor. The precision and order of financial analysis provided a comforting contrast to the chaos of my personal situation. By Friday evening, my phone indicated that the certified letter had been delivered and signed for by my father. The expected barrage of calls and texts followed, but I maintained my boundary, responding to each with the same simple message: please direct all communication to my attorney. Saturday morning brought unexpected information via social media. Eric had posted proudly about his food truck purchase, including photos of the vehicle, a gleaming white truck with Global Melt emblazoned on the side in vibrant lettering. The caption read, "Dreams becoming reality. So excited to announce that Global Melt is officially happening. Secured the perfect truck with state-of-the-art kitchen equipment and unique features that will set us apart in the food truck scene. Huge thanks to my amazing family for believing in this vision and making it possible with their support." First investors meeting on Tuesday at Riverside Bank, taking this to the next level. Entrepreneur, Juck Food Truck Life, Juck Global Fusion, Juck Grilled Cheese. The post included several interior photos of expensive-looking equipment and a shot of Eric grinning widely beside the truck, keys in hand. My money, all $34,500 of it, was clearly visible in this tangible form. More concerning was the mention of an investors' meeting at Riverside Bank, my own employer. I immediately forwarded screenshots to Vanessa, adding, "My brother has scheduled an investors' meeting at my workplace on Tuesday. This seems like a direct attempt to pressure me through my professional connections. How should I handle this?" Her response came quickly. "This is inappropriate but strategic timing on their part. The meeting location is likely deliberate, given your employment there. Document everything, but don't engage directly. I'll adjust our timeline and approach accordingly." A follow-up email arrived 30 minutes later. "Upon further consideration, this investors' meeting presents both a challenge and an opportunity. If your brother is representing your stolen funds as his own investment to potential investors, this constitutes fraud. Such misrepresentation in a formal investment context elevates the seriousness of the situation. I suggest modifying our approach. Rather than waiting for the full 5-day period to elapse, we could send formal notification to Riverside Bank's legal department, informing them that funds being represented as Eric Turner's investment capital are, in fact, misappropriated from your account without consent. This would force the bank to postpone any investment facilitation pending resolution of the dispute. While this would bring the matter into your workplace environment, it would also prevent further financial entanglement with innocent third-party investors. Please advise if you wish to proceed with this approach." The prospect of my family drama spilling into my professional space was deeply uncomfortable. I had always maintained strict separation between my personal and work lives, rarely discussing family matters with colleagues. Now that boundary was at risk of collapsing completely. Yet Vanessa's point about protecting potential investors from fraud was compelling. My parents' actions were no longer affecting just me. They were potentially drawing others into a financial misrepresentation that could have serious consequences. After careful consideration, I replied, "Let's proceed with notifying the bank's legal department. I'll also alert my direct supervisor on Monday about the situation to ensure there's no misunderstanding about my own involvement." The rest of the weekend passed in relative calm as I prepared myself mentally for the week ahead. "I understand. I'm not trying to sabotage my brother's business," I felt compelled to clarify. "I just can't allow my stolen savings to be used to secure additional investments under false pretenses." "Of course not. You're doing the right thing by disclosing this." Diane hesitated, then added more personally, "Family financial disputes are particularly painful. Whatever happens, your position here is secure." Her reassurance eased one of my unspoken worries, that this messy situation might somehow damage my professional standing. "Thank you, I appreciate your support." As I left Diane's office, I noticed several text notifications on my phone, all from Eric. "Just found out you're trying to stop tomorrow's meeting at the bank. What the hell, Sabrina? Mom and Dad said they were going to pay you back. Why? Are you doing this? I've put everything into this business. Don't ruin this for me." And finally, "We need to talk, in person, today. This has gone too far." I didn't respond to any of them, forwarding the messages to Vanessa instead. Her reply was immediate and firm. "Do not meet with him alone. All communication should continue through legal channels." By lunchtime, the situation had escalated. I received an email from Thomas in commercial lending. "Ms. Turner, our legal department has notified me of a dispute regarding funds being presented as investment capital for Global Melt LLC. Given this development, tomorrow's meeting has been postponed pending resolution. I understand this is a sensitive family matter and appreciate your professional handling of the situation. If you have a moment, I'd like to briefly discuss this in person." I replied, agreeing to meet him at 1:00 p.m., then forwarded the exchange to Vanessa. The postponement of the meeting was the right outcome, but I felt a surprising twinge of regret for Eric. Despite everything, he was still my brother, and I knew how much this business meant to him. The problem wasn't his dream. It was the means. My parents had chosen to fund it. Thomas's office was on the 3rd floor, in the executive section of the building. As I approached for our 1 p.m. meeting, I was startled to see my father emerging from the elevator, heading in the same direction. His eyes widened upon seeing me, a complex mixture of emotions crossing his face: anger, embarrassment, and something that might have been regret. "Sabrina." He stopped several feet away, as if uncertain whether to approach closer. "We need to talk about this situation." "Dad, I've made it clear that all communication should go through my attorney." I maintained my professional demeanor, acutely aware that we were in my workplace. "Why are you here?" "I came to explain things to the lending officer. This misunderstanding is getting out of hand." He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "The money was a temporary loan. We were going to pay you back once Eric's business was established." "A loan requires consent from the lender," I said, repeating what I'd told my mother. "You never asked me. You never told me. You just took it." "Because we knew you'd say no." The words burst out, frustration evident in his tone. "You've never supported your brother's endeavors, always so critical, so skeptical. This time, he has a real chance at success." The unfairness of this characterization stung. "I've supported Eric through 5 college attempts, 3 previous business failures, and countless other fresh starts. What I don't support is stealing my house deposit to fund his latest venture." "It wasn't stealing," my father insisted, the familiar family mythology reasserting itself. "It was reallocation of family resources for the greater good." "My savings aren't family resources. They're mine. I earned them." "With opportunities we provided. Who paid for your first semester of college before you got scholarships? Who bought your first car? Who—" "I repaid those investments years ago," I interrupted, keeping my voice low but firm. "Not just financially, but by being self-sufficient while you continued supporting Eric through one failure after another. I'm not having this discussion here. Please leave before you create a scene in my workplace." "I'm here for a legitimate meeting with Thomas," my father said, straightening his jacket defensively. "Unlike you, I'm trying to resolve this situation without destroying your brother's future." Before I could respond, Thomas emerged from his office, his expression carefully neutral as he assessed the tension between us. "Mr. Turner, Ms. Turner, perhaps we should have this conversation together in my office, rather than in the hallway." My father nodded stiffly. I hesitated, then followed them into the office, maintaining professional composure despite my internal turmoil. Thomas closed the door and gestured to the chairs across from his desk. "I understand there's a dispute regarding the funds being presented as investment capital for Global Melt LLC," he began, addressing us both with diplomatic precision. "As a financial institution, Riverside has strict protocols regarding transparent sourcing of investment funds." "There's been a misunderstanding," my father said immediately. "The funds in question were a family investment in Eric's business, with the understanding that returns would benefit everyone involved." "That's not true," I stated flatly. "Those funds, $3,500, were withdrawn from my personal savings account without my knowledge or consent. They were accumulated through my earnings and personal inheritance, earmarked specifically for a home purchase." Thomas nodded, his expression remaining carefully neutral. "Our records confirm that the withdrawal in question came from an account primarily funded by Ms. Turner's direct deposits and documented inheritance, though with Mr. Turner as a legal co-signer." "Co-signing was a formality from when Sabrina was 18, my father said, shifting strategies slightly. "The understanding within our family has always been that these resources would be available for important family investments." "That was never the understanding," I countered, maintaining my composure. "There was never any discussion of my savings being available for Eric's business ventures." Thomas held up a hand, gently interrupting our back and forth. "The bank's concern is not with family understandings, but with accurate representation of investment funds. Mr. Turner, in your son's business plan and investment prospectus, these funds are presented as his personal capital contribution, demonstrating his commitment to potential investors. My father shifted uncomfortably. Eric has invested considerable sweat equity. The prospectus specifically cites a $35,000 cash investment from the founder's personal funds, Thomas clarified, referencing a document on his desk. Given the dispute regarding the source of these funds, we cannot in good conscience proceed with facilitating additional investment until this matter is resolved. This is ridiculous, my father said, his frustration mounting. You're allowing a family disagreement to derail a legitimate business opportunity. The bank's position is not about family dynamics but financial transparency, Thomas replied, his tone remaining professional but firm. Potential investors have the right to accurate information about the capitalization of any venture they're considering. My father turned to me, his expression hardening. Are you satisfied now? You've not only refused to support your brother, but actively sabotaged him. The accusation, so typical of our family's pattern of placing all responsibility on me rather than acknowledging their own actions, crystallized something inside me. In that moment, any lingering doubt about my course of action vanished. I didn't sabotage anyone, I said, my voice steady and clear. You and Mom stole my savings, gave it to Eric under false pretenses, and are now trying to use it to secure additional investments based on misrepresentation. I'm protecting myself and preventing fraud against others. Ms. Turner is correct about the legal implications, Thomas added. Presenting disputed funds as unencumbered personal investment could constitute fraud, exposing not just Eric, but potentially both of you as facilitators to significant liability. My father's face flushed, but before he could respond, the door opened after a brief knock. The bank's head of legal, Patricia Chen, entered with a folder in hand. I apologize for interrupting, but I thought you should see this immediately, she said to Thomas, placing the folder on his desk. We've received formal notification from Lopez Legal Solutions regarding the disputed funds. Thomas reviewed the document briefly, then looked up at my father. Mr. Turner, this demand letter indicates that you and your wife have been given 5 business days to return the funds in question to your daughter's account. That period ends next Wednesday. Until this matter is resolved, tomorrow's investment meeting is canceled, and Riverside cannot facilitate any financial transactions related to Global Melt LLC using these disputed funds. My father's expression shifted from anger to dismay as the professional, legal nature of the situation, finally, seemed to register. This wasn't just a family disagreement that could be managed through emotional manipulation. It was a potential fraud case being treated with appropriate seriousness by a financial institution. You've gone too far, Sabrina, he said quietly, a new note of betrayal in his voice. You've chosen money over family. No, Dad, you and Mom chose Eric's business over my trust and financial security. I'm simply refusing to be the victim of that choice. Patricia Chen, who had remained silent during this exchange, spoke with gentle but firm authority. Mr. Turner, I strongly advise you to consult with your own attorney regarding this matter. The legal implications extend beyond family relations, potentially affecting your son's business relationships and your own financial standing. My father stood abruptly. This isn't over, he said, looking directly at me. The threat wasn't physical but emotional, a warning that the family would not easily accept my deviation from the established pattern of sacrifice for Eric's benefit. You're right, I replied evenly. It isn't over until my money is returned. After my father left, Thomas and Patricia exchanged glances. Then Thomas turned to me apologetically. I'm sorry you had to experience that confrontation in your workplace, Sabrina. We would have handled this differently had we known your father would appear unannounced. It's not your fault. My family doesn't respect boundaries. That's become abundantly clear. Patricia nodded sympathetically. From a legal perspective, you've taken all the appropriate steps. the demand letter is properly structured, and your documentation of the fund's sources is thorough. While we can't advise you on personal matters, the bank recognizes your claim as legitimate. Their professional validation strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just my perception of injustice, it was an objectively recognized wrong that warranted the steps I was taking. After finishing the meeting and returning to my department, I found a text from Eric waiting. Dad just told me what happened. At the bank. The investors' meeting is canceled. Thanks for ruining everything. Moments later, another text followed. I swear I didn't know the money came from your account without permission. Mom and Dad told me it was a family investment you'd agreed to, but you didn't have to destroy my chance like this. Could have been handled differently. For the first time, I considered responding directly to Eric. If he truly hadn't known the source of the funds, his anger was at least partially misdirected. Before I could decide, another message appeared. I'm at the coffee shop across from your bank. Please, 15 minutes. Just hear me out. Against better judgment, I texted back. I can't discuss the legal aspects of the situation, but I'll give you 15 minutes during my break at 3 p.m. Immediately after sending this, I forwarded the exchange to Vanessa with an explanation of my decision. Her response was quick, but measured. I advise against meeting alone, but I understand the personal dimension. Meet only in the public coffee shop, keep the conversation factual rather than emotional, and end the meeting immediately if he becomes hostile or manipulative. Remember, anything you say could be used in future legal proceedings. When I entered the coffee shop at 3:00, Eric was already there, occupying a table in the corner. He looked different from the triumphant entrepreneur in his social media photos, tired, stressed, and noticeably angry. I ordered a tea before joining him, giving myself a moment to center my thoughts. 15 minutes, I said, sitting across from him and placing my phone face up on the table, the time displayed clearly. I'm listening. You could have come to me directly, he began, his tone accusatory. Instead, you went nuclear. Lawyers? Bank notifications canceling my investors' meeting. Do you have any idea how damaging this is to my business reputation? I took a careful sip of tea before responding. Eric, Mom and Dad took my money without permission. I discovered it by accident when trying to buy a house. When confronted, they refused to return it and tried to withdraw more. What would your response have been in my position? I would have talked to family first, not immediately involved lawyers and bankers. I did talk to Mom. She justified taking my money because you needed it more than I did. Dad tried to empty my investment account after I discovered the initial theft. At what point should I have continued just talking while they took everything I've worked for? Eric's expression flickered, some of his righteous indignation faltering. I didn't know they took it without asking you. They told me you had agreed to invest in the business as part of a family support package. And you believed that? After how hard I've worked to save for a house. I thought maybe you'd decided to help me first, then buy your house later. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. Look, I'm not defending what they did. But you're punishing me for their actions. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm recovering my stolen savings and preventing fraud against potential investors who would be misled about the source of your startup capital. I can get other funding, Eric insisted. Just give me time to arrange it before blocking the current investment. The truck is purchased, equipment installed. I'm scheduled to open in 3 weeks. If investors pull out now because of this dispute, everything collapses. For a moment, I felt the familiar pull of family obligation, the pressure to accommodate, to find a solution that protected Eric from consequences. Then I remembered the calculated way my parents had checked my account balances for months before taking the money, the casual dismissal of my financial security, the immediate attempt to drain more funds when confronted. The solution is simple, I said. Return my money, all of it, immediately. Then secure legitimate funding based on honest representations. I can't just produce $35,000 out of nowhere. Eric's voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby patrons. He lowered it with visible effort. The money is invested in the truck and equipment. Then sell the truck, or have mom and dad mortgage their house, or find actual investors who know the truth about your capital situation. The point is, solving. Your funding problem can't come at the expense of my savings. Eric stared at me, a new calculation visible in his expression. What if we make it official? Convert the money into a formal investment or loan with proper documentation? You'd get repayment with interest, plus a small ownership stake. The offer was tempting in its apparent reasonableness, a way to resolve the situation without forcing a sale of the truck or continued legal conflict. But it still fundamentally accepted the initial theft as a starting point, merely regularizing it after the fact. No, I said after a moment's consideration. That would legitimize how this money was obtained in the first place. I'm not interested in becoming an involuntary investor in your business, Eric. I want my savings returned, in full, as demanded in the legal notice. So it's all or nothing. No compromise? Returning stolen property isn't a compromise situation. It's the bare minimum requirement for moving forward. Eric's expression hardened. You know mom and dad don't have that kind of money liquid. And forcing me to sell the truck now means taking a massive loss, probably bankruptcy before I even get started. Those are consequences of their actions, not my problem to solve. Easy for you to say when you're not the one whose dream is being destroyed. The familiar accusation in his tone, that I was the heartless pragmatist reigning on his creative visions, grated on nerves raw from years of similar characterizations. My dream of home ownership was destroyed when they emptied my account, I countered. Where was your concern for that? Eric fell silent, perhaps finally registering the reality of what had been taken from me. After a moment, he asked in a quieter voice, What happens if the money isn't returned by the deadline? In the letter? My attorney files a civil lawsuit against mom and dad. We pursue legal remedies including potential liens against their assets. The bank continues blocking any investment activities related to misrepresented funds. And I file a police report regarding the theft. You'd really do that to our parents? Criminal charges? They stole $35,000 from me, Eric. What would you call it? Our 15 minutes had elapsed, but neither of us moved to end the conversation. The coffee shop continued its afternoon rhythm around us, oblivious to the family fracture unfolding. At our corner table. There has to be another way, Eric said finally. One that doesn't destroy the family or my business. There is. Return my money by Wednesday. How you and our parents arrange that is up to you, but it needs to happen. As I gathered my things to leave, Eric reached across the table, not quite touching my arm. Sabrina, wait. I'll talk to mom and dad tonight. See if we can figure something out. Just don't file anything else until Wednesday, please. I considered his request. The demand letter's deadline already provided the exact time frame he was asking for. The timeline stands as stated in the legal notice. I hope you find a solution, Eric. Truly. As I walked back to the bank, I felt an unexpected lightness despite the emotional intensity of the confrontation. For the first time in our adult relationship, I had held firm on my own behalf against Eric's needs and our parents' enabling. The family script had called for me to find a way to accommodate, to be the reasonable one who bent to preserve peace. Instead, I had maintained my boundaries, articulated the harm done to me, and refused to accept responsibility for solving a problem I hadn't created. Whether my money would be returned remained uncertain, but something invaluable had already been recovered, my voice and agency within a family dynamic that had long suppressed both. Tuesday morning arrived with unexpected developments. An email from Vanessa contained a formal communication from my parents' newly retained attorney, Howard Brentwood. In response to the demand letter dated April 21st regarding funds withdrawn from Sabrina Turner's account, my clients acknowledged the withdrawal of $34,500 and are prepared to discuss terms of repayment. We request a meeting to establish a mutually acceptable resolution timeline. Please contact my office to arrange this. Discussion. Attached was a scanned bank statement showing a transfer of $5,000 back to my account, a partial repayment that had arrived overnight. The accompanying note from Vanessa was cautiously optimistic. This represents a significant shift from their previous position. The partial repayment, while insufficient, demonstrates acknowledgement of the obligation. They've also legitimized the situation by retaining counsel, rather than continuing to treat this as an informal family matter. I suggest we proceed with the meeting but maintain our full demand and timeline. Your thoughts? I forwarded the bank statement to my personal email, then checked my account online. The $5,000 transfer had indeed posted, bringing my balance to just over $5,700, a fraction of what had been taken, but a concrete admission that the money should be returned. I replied to Vanessa, "Agree to the meeting, I'll maintain flexibility on timeline if they commit to full repayment, but no reduction in amount." This practical development was followed by a more emotional one, a text from my mother, the first direct communication since I'd established the boundary routing all. Contact through Vanessa. "We've made an initial repayment and are working on returning the rest. I'm so sorry, Sabrina. We never meant to hurt you. Please call when you're ready to talk." The apology, however incomplete, was unprecedented. In our family dynamic, acknowledgments of harm were rare, especially related to disparities in how Eric and I were treated. I didn't respond directly but forwarded the message to Vanessa, who advised, "This is positive but premature. Maintain communication boundaries until the financial matter is fully resolved. Personal reconciliation, if desired, can follow legal resolution." Her counsel made sense. Despite the temptation to engage with this first expression of regret, the fundamental issue remained unresolved. Emotional reconciliation couldn't precede practical restitution. At work, I maintained my professional focus despite the ongoing personal turmoil. The canceled investors' meeting meant Eric wouldn't be appearing at the bank, eliminating the risk of another workplace confrontation. I threw myself into my analysis projects, finding refuge in the orderly world of financial spreadsheets and risk calculations. During lunch, a notification from my banking app indicated another transfer had posted, an additional $7,500 into my account. No accompanying message, just the money appearing with the transfer description, "Partial repayment, RT." My father's initials, $12,500 returned in less than 24 hours. Something had shifted dramatically in my parents' approach. I forwarded the transaction details to Vanessa, who responded, "This is encouraging." They now need to return $22,000 to fulfill the demand. The meeting is scheduled for Thursday at 4 p.m. at our offices. When I left work that evening, I was surprised to find Zoe waiting in the lobby. "Thought you might want company for dinner," she said. "You've been handling a lot alone." Her thoughtfulness brought unexpected emotion to the surface. Throughout this ordeal, I had maintained such tight control over my reactions that I hadn't fully processed the toll it was taking. "That would be great, actually." We settled at a small Thai restaurant several blocks from the bank, ordering familiar comfort dishes before I updated her on the day's developments. "They're actually returning the money?" Zoe's surprise mirrored my own. "What changed?" "I'm not sure," I admitted. Maybe the reality of legal consequences finally registered, or Eric convinced them after our conversation yesterday. "Speaking of Eric, have you heard from him today?" "No, but I'm assuming he knows about the repayments." Zoe studied me over her pad tie. "How are you feeling about all this? Really?" The question penetrated the practical facade I'd maintained throughout the crisis. Confused, I said, after a moment. Relieved they're returning the money, but hurt. Deeply hurt that they took it in the first place, that they saw me as a resource to be tapped rather than a daughter to be respected. That makes perfect sense, Zoe affirmed. Getting the money back doesn't undo the betrayal. Exactly. And I keep wondering how I missed it. This fundamental misalignment in how we viewed our relationship. I thought we were family. They thought I was a convenient financing option for Eric's dreams. You didn't miss anything, Zoe countered, firmly. You trusted your parents because that's what children are supposed to be able to do. They betrayed that trust. That's on them, not you. Her straightforward assignment of responsibility was refreshing after years of family dynamics that consistently placed the burden of accommodation on me. What happens after you get all the money back? She asked. With your relationship with them, I mean. It was the question I'd been avoiding in my focus on the practical aspects of recovery. I don't know, I admitted. I can't imagine going back to how things were before, pretending this never happened. But I also can't imagine permanent estrangement. You don't have to decide right now, Zoe reminded me. Resolve the financial issue first. Then take time to figure out what kind of relationship feels safe and healthy moving forward. Her advice aligned with Vanessa's. Separate the practical resolution from the emotional reconciliation. The former had clear parameters and a defined timeline. The latter would be complex, gradual, and unpredictable. Wednesday morning brought another notification. A third transfer of $10,000 had posted overnight. My account now held $22,700, representing $22,500 of the returned funds. Exactly $12,000 remained outstanding from the original amount taken. I forwarded the information to Vanessa, who responded with characteristic efficiency. Their approach suggests they're gathering funds incrementally rather than in a single large transfer. This is consistent with liquidating investments or borrowing from multiple sources. Given this pattern and their retention of counsel, I recommend flexibility on the final timeline if tomorrow's meeting demonstrates genuine commitment to full repayment. Just before lunch, my personal email notification chimed. The message was from Eric, sent from his business account rather than his personal one. Sabrina, I want to formally apologize for my role in this situation. While I didn't know the money came from your account without permission, I should have questioned where such a large sum came from suddenly. I was so focused on making the business happen that I ignored obvious red flags. Mom and Dad are selling their vacation timeshare and liquidating Dad's collectible coin investment to return the remaining funds. They've also taken a loan against their life insurance policy for the initial repayments. I've been able to secure legitimate financing through a small business grant program and a private investor who knows the full situation. I know money doesn't fix the breach of trust, but I hope it's a start. The food truck was purchased with your savings, and that can't be undone without destroying the business completely. But I've added your name to the business insurance as a goodwill gesture. If anything happens to the truck before full repayment, you'll be compensated first. I'm still your brother, even though our relationship will clearly need to change. When you're ready to talk directly, I'm here. Eric. The email reflected a maturity I hadn't often seen from my brother, acknowledging responsibility, offering concrete information about the repayment sources, and recognizing that financial restitution was necessary but not sufficient for healing the relationship. I forwarded it to Vanessa with a brief note. This seems promising regarding the remaining funds. Does the insurance gesture have any legal significance we should address at tomorrow's meeting? Her response was prompt. The insurance designation has limited legal value but demonstrates good faith. More importantly, his email provides written confirmation of the outstanding debt and acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Save it for our records. If you wish to respond, keep it brief and factual. After consideration, I sent a simple reply to Eric. Thank you for the information about the repayment sources and the insurance designation. I appreciate your acknowledgement of the situation. I'll be ready to talk directly once the financial matter is fully resolved. No emotional declarations, no accusations, no premature forgiveness, just acknowledgement of his communication and a clear boundary about when direct relationship repair could begin. By Wednesday evening, the final outstanding funds had been transferred, $12,000 appearing in two separate transactions of $7,000 and $5,000. My account balance now reflected full repayment of the $3,400 taken without permission. The completion of the financial restitution brought an unexpected wave of emotion, not just relief, but a complex mixture of vindication, lingering hurt, and uncertainty about what came next. I had stood my ground, followed through with legal intervention, and recovered my savings. But the family relationships damaged in the process remained in limbo, awaiting some form of repair that money alone couldn't provide. Thursday's meeting with the attorneys now had a different purpose, not to enforce the demand for repayment, but to formally acknowledge its completion and establish any necessary documentation. Vanessa suggested I attend primarily as an observer, while she handled the legal aspects. We'll need signed acknowledgement of the repayment and a release of further financial claims, she explained. I also recommend a formal agreement about future account access and financial boundaries. When I arrived at Vanessa's office Thursday afternoon, I was surprised to find only Howard Brentwood, my parents' attorney, waiting in the conference room. He explained that my parents had chosen not to attend in person, wanting to respect my boundaries while the legal matters were finalized. Your parents wanted me to express their profound regret for their actions, Brentwood began after introductions. They recognized that taking funds without permission was wrong, regardless of their intentions. We appreciate that acknowledgement, Vanessa replied professionally. As the financial matter has been fully resolved with the return of $34,500, we're prepared to sign the mutual release agreement I sent over this morning. The documents were straightforward: confirmation that the funds had been returned in full, release of further financial claims related to this specific incident, and a formal agreement that my parents would relinquish all access to my financial accounts going forward. The last document was a letter from my parents relinquishing any claim to co-ownership of the personal items I had retrieved from their home, including my grandmother's jewelry and savings bonds. As I reviewed these papers, Brentwood spoke again. Ms. Turner, while this resolves the legal aspects, your parents wanted me to convey their hope for eventual personal reconciliation at whatever pace and in whatever form you're comfortable with. The formal setting and third-party delivery of this sentiment felt both strange and appropriate, acknowledging the severity of the breach while expressing genuine desire for repair. Please tell them I received their message, I replied, matching his professional tone. I'll need time to process everything that's happened, but I don't rule out reconciliation in the future. After signing the documents and receiving copies for my records, I left feeling strangely hollow. The practical victory, complete recovery of my savings, should have brought more satisfaction than it did. Instead, I felt the weight of what remained unresolved. The trust broken, the family mythology exposed, the relationships fundamentally altered. As I drove home, my phone rang with Diane's name displaying on the car's Bluetooth system. I answered, curious about this unusual after hours. Contact from my supervisor? Sabrina, I wanted to let you know that Thomas received notification from Eric that he's withdrawing his loan application from Riverside, she said without preamble. He's apparently secured alternate financing. Yes, he mentioned that in an email, a grant program and private investor. That's good news all around, Diane said, her tone warming. Thomas was impressed with how you handled the situation, by the way. Said you maintained exceptional professionalism throughout a difficult personal matter. The professional validation was unexpectedly meaningful. Thank you for letting me know. I tried to keep the personal and professional aspects separate as much as possible. I'd say you succeeded admirably. She paused briefly. This might be overstepping, but we have an opening in the small business advisory group. Given your experience, both professional and, well, personal, with family business dynamics, you might be a valuable addition to the team. It would be a lateral move, but with potential for advancement into management within a year. The opportunity caught me completely off guard. I'm definitely interested in learning more. Excellent. Let's discuss details next week when things have settled a bit. And Sabrina? I'm glad things worked out with the financial recovery. Family situations are always the most difficult. After we disconnected, I sat in my parked car for several minutes, processing this unexpected professional development. The crisis that had threatened to spill messily into my workplace had somehow transformed into a career opportunity. My handling of a painful personal situation translating into recognition of skills valuable to the bank. When I finally entered my apartment, I found a small package propped against my door, a padded envelope with no postage, suggesting hand delivery. Inside was a house key attached to a simple silver keychain engraved with my initials, and a handwritten note from Eric. The food truck's first official day is Saturday at the farmer's market, 9 a.m. 2 p.m. No pressure to come, but you have a standing invitation anytime. When you're ready to restart your house hunt, this key is waiting for its home. E. The gesture, simple, symbolic, and notably lacking in emotional manipulation, seemed to represent a potential new dynamic between us. No dramatic declarations or promises of changed behavior, just acknowledgement of my priorities and an open invitation without expectation. That evening, as I organized the legal documents from the day's meeting, my phone displayed a text from my mother. The legal matter is settled, but our hearts remain heavy. We're here when, if you're ready, to talk. No pressure, no timeline. We love you, Sabrina. For the first time since discovering the theft, I felt tears forming. Not from anger or hurt, though those emotions remained, but from recognition of what might be genuine remorse and the tentative first steps toward rebuilding trust. The text didn't minimize what they'd done or expect immediate forgiveness. It simply expressed love and acknowledged my need for space and time. I didn't respond immediately, honoring my own need to process at my own pace. The financial recovery had been straightforward once legal pressure was applied. The emotional recovery, both mine and our families, would follow a less predictable path. Zoe called late that evening, checking in as she had faithfully throughout the ordeal. How did the final meeting go? The money's all returned, legal documents signed, closure, at least on the financial front. That's huge, she said. Are you celebrating? Not exactly. It feels incomplete. Like closing one chapter, but being uncertain about the next one. That makes sense. What happens now? I considered the question carefully. I'm going to restart my house hunt. The money's back, so that plan can move forward. As for my family, I think we take small steps. Set clear boundaries. See if something healthier can be built from here. Do you think that's possible? After what they did? I don't know, I admitted. But I know who I am now. Someone who can stand firm, demand respect, and protect herself when necessary. That knowledge changes everything about how I'll approach any relationship with them going forward. After we hung up, I found myself drawn to the window overlooking the city lights. The past 10 days had transformed me in ways I was still discovering, revealing strengths I hadn't fully recognized, clarifying values I hadn't articulated, and establishing boundaries I hadn't enforced. The inheritance my parents had nearly stolen was restored, but something more valuable had been gained in the process, a clear-eyed understanding of my worth and the courage to demand that others recognize it too. Whatever came next with my family, that foundation would remain unshaken. Tomorrow, I would call Heather, the real estate agent, and restart my house search. The craftsman on Elm Street was likely gone, but other houses waited, places that could become home, purchased with savings that now represented not just financial discipline, but the power of standing up for oneself. The ripple effects of this conflict would continue to spread through our family system, rearranging relationships and expectations in ways impossible to predict. But for the first time, I would be an active participant in that process, rather than a passive accommodator of others' needs. The money had been returned. The deeper work of redefining family, of determining what love and respect would look like in practice rather than theory, was just beginning. 2 weeks after the full repayment of my funds, I found myself once again touring homes with Heather. The real estate market hadn't paused during my family crisis, and the craftsman house on Elm Street had indeed sold to another buyer. This loss stung briefly, but Heather's endless optimism helped me refocus on new possibilities. "The spring inventory is really opening up," she said as we drove to our third showing of the day. "And honestly, with your pre-approval solid and no contingencies, you're in an excellent position as a buyer." The house we were heading to wasn't one I would have selected from online listings, a 1950s ranch-style home that appeared plain in photos. But Heather had insisted it had great bones and incredible potential, phrases I'd learned to respect during our previous search. "The owners did all the unsexy but expensive updates already," she explained as we pulled into the driveway. "New roof 2 years ago, HVAC replaced last summer, electrical panel upgraded. All the things that cost money but don't show in photos." As we walked through the front door, I was struck by the quality of light. Large windows in the living area overlooked a surprisingly private backyard with mature trees. The layout was open and flowing, with hardwood floors beneath worn carpet visible at the edges. The kitchen needed updating but was spacious and functional. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a partially finished basement offered more space than the craftsman house had, though with less architectural character. "What do you think?" Heather asked, watching me absorb the details. "It has potential," I admitted. "Very different from what I thought I wanted, but sometimes what we need isn't what we initially imagine," she finished, a statement that felt unexpectedly profound given recent events. We toured the rest of the house, and I found myself increasingly drawn to its quiet solidity. No dramatic features, no trendy design elements, just thoughtful construction that had withstood decades with grace. The asking price was $185,000, slightly higher than the craftsman, but the additional space and updated systems justified the difference. "I'd like to make an offer," I decided as we completed the tour. Heather's eyebrows raised slightly. That was decisive. "I'm learning to trust my judgment," I replied, a simple statement that encompassed a profound personal shift. Later that evening, as I reviewed the offer documents Heather had prepared, my phone displayed a call from an unexpected source. My father. We hadn't spoken directly since the confrontation at the bank over 2 weeks ago. Our only communication had been through attorneys and the brief, careful text messages from my mother. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Sabrina." His voice sounded tentative, lacking the authoritative tone I associated with him. "Thank you for picking up. I wasn't sure you would. What can I do for you, Dad?" I kept my tone neutral, neither welcoming nor hostile. "I wanted to speak with you directly, to apologize." He paused, seeming to gather himself. "What your mother and I did was wrong. Not just taking the money, but the way we've treated you and Eric differently for years. The expectations we've placed on you while making excuses for him. All of The directness of this acknowledgement was unprecedented. My father had never been one to admit mistakes, particularly not in such unambiguous terms. I appreciate that, I said carefully. It means something to hear you say it. We've been talking with Dr. Farrell, a family therapist. It was Eric's suggestion, actually. We've had 3 sessions so far, trying to understand how we got here. Another pause. The things we're realizing about our parenting. It's not easy to face. This revelation surprised me. My parents had always dismissed therapy as unnecessary for normal family issues. Their willingness to engage with professional help suggested a level of serious reflection I hadn't anticipated. That sounds positive, I offered, unsure how else to respond. It is. My father cleared his throat. Sabrina, I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness or for things to go back to how they were. I just wanted you to know we're working to understand what went wrong and how to do better. If you're willing, Dr. Farrell suggested a joint session eventually, but only when you're ready, if ever. The careful respect for my boundaries represented another significant shift. In the past, my parents would have expected immediate reconciliation once an apology, however minimal, had been offered. I need more time, I said honestly. I'm still processing everything that happened. Of course. Take all the time you need. He hesitated, then added, I heard you're house hunting again. That's good. The comment suggested he'd been in touch with Eric, who knew about my renewed search from Zoe. The realization that they were discussing me was uncomfortable, but not surprising. I made an offer today, actually, on a ranch house across town. That's wonderful news. His genuine pleasure at this development came through clearly. I hope it works out. You deserve a place of your own. The conversation ended shortly after, without pressure for further engagement or specific plans. Just an open door, should I choose to walk through it eventually. The following morning brought exciting news. My offer on the ranch house had been accepted. The sellers had another offer, but preferred mine due to my financing being already secured and my flexibility on the closing date. Heather scheduled the home inspection for the following week, and the mortgage process began moving forward with my now restored down payment. Parallel to these positive developments, I had my first meeting with the Small Business Advisory Group, at work. The team specialized in helping family-owned businesses navigate financial challenges, succession planning, and growth strategies, areas that had taken on new personal significance given recent events. Thomas, who had witnessed the confrontation with my father, was the team leader. He welcomed me warmly, introducing me to the other advisors without mentioning my personal connection to family business dynamics. Sabrina brings strong analytical skills and a fresh perspective, he said simply. I think she'll be a valuable addition to our team. The work was immediately engaging, more complex and relationship-oriented than my previous position. Rather than pure number crunching, it involved understanding the human systems behind the financial ones. I found myself drawing on my personal experience in surprising ways, able to identify family dynamics that might impact business decisions and risk factors that traditional financial analysis might miss. After the meeting, Thomas pulled me aside briefly. How are you settling in after everything? I'm good, I said, realizing it was largely true. Moving forward professionally and personally. He nodded, seemingly satisfied. I think you'll excel in this role. Your experience gives you insights others might miss. My experience getting money stolen by family? I asked with unexpected directness. Thomas didn't flinch at the bluntness. Your experience navigating complex family, financial dynamics, and finding constructive resolutions. Not everyone could have handled that situation as effectively as you did. His framing helped me see my ordeal as something potentially valuable rather than merely traumatic, a perspective shift I hadn't fully considered before. That weekend, I decided to take a small step toward re-engaging with family, visiting Eric's food truck at the farmer's market. I hadn't responded to his standing invitation, but curiosity about his business and a tentative openness to rebuilding our relationship led me there on a sunny Saturday morning. Global Melt was easy to spot. The white truck with vibrant lettering stood out among the market stalls, with a small line already formed despite the early hour. I observed from a distance at first, watching Eric interact with customers. He seemed different somehow, more focused, more professional than in his previous ventures. He handled the small team with clear direction, expedited orders efficiently, and engaged with customers warmly without the excessive charm that had often seemed performative. I joined the line eventually, and Eric's expression when he spotted me registered surprise followed by careful pleasure. He didn't make a scene or draw attention to my presence, simply nodding acknowledgement as I moved forward in the queue. When I reached the ordering window, he spoke normally, without the excessive enthusiasm I might have expected. "Good morning. What can I get for you?" I studied the creative menu of globally inspired grilled cheese sandwiches. "What do you recommend?" The Mumbai Melt is our most popular, cheddar with chickpea masala, cilantro chutney, and pickle on sourdough. Or the Kyoto if you want something lighter, mild white cheese with shiso leaf, pickled ginger, and a miso glaze. Mumbai Melt sounds perfect, I decided. He nodded, ringing up the order. "That'll be $9.50. I reached for my wallet, but he shook his head slightly. "On the house. First-time family discount." I started to protest but recognized the gesture for what it was. Not manipulation, but a small olive branch. "Thank you. It'll be about 7 minutes. We'll call your name." I stepped aside, observing the efficient operation. The truck's interior gleamed with professional equipment, and the small team worked with well-rehearsed coordination. This wasn't the haphazard startup I'd expected based on Eric's previous ventures. It showed genuine planning and professionalism. When my name was called, Eric handed me the sandwich personally. "There's a nice spot under the oak tree if you're eating here," he suggested. "Less crowded than the main seating area." I took his advice, finding a bench in the dappled shade. The sandwich was genuinely excellent. Creative flavors perfectly balanced, the bread crisp without being greasy. As I ate, I realized this might actually be a viable business with proper management and focused execution. I was nearly finished when Eric approached, wiping his hands on a kitchen towel. "Mind if I join you for a minute? We have a lull between breakfast and lunch crowds." I gestured to the empty space on the bench, and he sat, maintaining a respectful distance. "So, what do you think? Honestly?" "It's delicious," I said sincerely. "Really creative but not gimmicky. Good execution." He smiled, genuine pleasure at the specific compliment rather than general praise. "Thanks. We've been refining the recipes for months." "The operation seems well organized," I observed. "Different from your previous ventures." Eric nodded, accepting this implicit criticism without defensiveness. "I took business management courses at the community college while developing the concept, and I hired people with food truck experience rather than trying to figure everything out myself." This acknowledgement of his past shortcomings, trying to do everything himself without proper preparation, represented significant growth. "How's the financial side?" I asked, unable to completely separate from my core concern. "Solid, actually. The grant program covered most of the equipment costs, and I found an investor who's taken a 20% stake for operating capital. We've exceeded projected sales for the first 2 weekends." He hesitated, then added, "I've been keeping detailed books from day one. Real accounting, not just approximations like before." "That's good to hear." A moment of awkward silence followed before Eric spoke again, his tone more serious. "I want you to know I really didn't understand where the money came from when Mom and Dad first presented it. They framed it as their investment drawn from their savings. It wasn't until after our conversation at the coffee shop that I pieced it together fully." But you suspected something wasn't right, I suggested, given the amount and how suddenly it appeared. He nodded, not evading responsibility. I should have asked more questions. The truth is, I didn't want to know. It was easier to accept the story they presented because it gave me what I wanted. This honest self-assessment impressed me more than elaborate apologies would have. We both enabled different aspects of the family dynamic for a long time. Dr. Farrell calls it a system of mutual reinforcement, Eric said with a small smile. Mom and Dad created the golden child, responsible child dynamic, but we both played our assigned roles. You've been seeing the therapist too? Weekly, plus the family sessions with Mom and Dad. Lots to unpack about how I developed this pattern of grand ideas without follow-through, and the expectation that someone would always bail me out. His willingness to examine his own contributions to the family dysfunction rather than simply blaming our parents showed maturity I hadn't previously associated with him. I should get back, he said, glancing at his watch. The lunch rush will start soon, but Sabrina, thanks for coming. It means a lot. The food was worth it, I said lightly, but added more seriously. And it's good to see you building something real. As he returned to the truck, I realized this interaction had been different from any we'd had before. More honest, more equal, without the underlying competition or resentment that had typically colored our exchanges. Whether this represented temporary improvement or lasting change remained to be seen, but it felt like a genuine step forward. The following week brought the home inspection on the ranch house, which revealed only minor issues easily addressed before closing. The mortgage approval process moved forward smoothly, with my loan officer commenting on the strength of my application given my substantial down payment and excellent credit history. You're looking at closing in about 30 days, she informed me. Barring any unexpected issues, you should be able to move in by early June. June, just 6 weeks away. After years of saving and planning, then the devastating setback of the theft, the goal was finally within reach. I would be a homeowner, with a place that was truly mine, protected from others' access or claims. As this external milestone approached, I found myself considering the invitation to join a family therapy session. The separate conversations with my father and Eric had shown promising signs of genuine reflection and change. While I remained cautious about re-engaging too quickly, I recognized that complete estrangement wasn't what I wanted long-term. After careful consideration, I called Dr. Farrell's office to schedule an individual consultation before committing to any joint sessions. The receptionist offered an appointment the following week, which I accepted with a mixture of apprehension and hope. Zoe, when I told her about this decision over lunch, expressed cautious support. It makes sense to talk to the therapist one-on-one first. See if their approach feels right to you. I'm not ready to just move past everything that happened, I clarified, but I don't want to close the door on potential healing either. You're handling this with incredible maturity, Zoe observed. Most people would either cut ties completely or rush back to normal without addressing the underlying issues. Neither extreme feels right. This isn't about forgiveness exactly, at least not yet. It's about seeing if there's a path forward with better boundaries and mutual respect. The day before my scheduled consultation with Dr. Farrell, I received an unexpected email from my mother. Dear Sabrina, Dr. Farrell mentioned you've scheduled a consultation, and I wanted to share something with you before that meeting. I've been working on a letter as part of my therapy, exploring the patterns in our family and my role in creating them. It's attached if you feel ready to read it. If not, that's completely okay too. I want you to know that whatever you decide about family therapy or our relationship going forward, I respect your choices and timeline. The work your father and I are doing isn't contingent on your participation. We recognize that rebuilding trust, if possible, will take time and consistent effort on our part. With love, Mom. The attached document was titled simply, Reflections. I hesitated before opening it, uncertain whether I was emotionally prepared for its contents. After several minutes of deliberation, I decided to read it before my appointment with Dr. Farrell, to better inform that conversation. The letter was longer and more insightful than I had anticipated. 6 single-spaced pages of careful self-examination. My mother traced patterns back to her own upbringing, examining how she had unconsciously recreated aspects of her parents' favoritism with her own children. She acknowledged specific instances throughout our childhood where Eric had received disproportionate attention, praise, and resources, while my achievements were taken for granted. Most importantly, she directly addressed the theft itself. Taking your savings was the culmination of years of unexamined assumptions that your stability and success meant you needed less support and consideration than Eric, that your resources were somehow extensions of family resources, while his needs were paramount, that your consent was less important than his opportunities. None of these assumptions were conscious, but that makes them no less harmful. We betrayed your trust in the most fundamental way, violating not just your finances, but your dignity and autonomy. I am profoundly sorry for this harm, which no apology or repayment can fully address. The unflinching acknowledgement of the wrong done to me, without qualifications or expectations of forgiveness, felt like a first step toward genuine healing. Not because it erased the harm, but because it demonstrated my mother's willingness to see it clearly rather than minimizing or justifying it. When I met with Dr. Farrell the following day, I brought the letter with me as a starting point for our discussion. She was a thoughtful woman in her 50s, with a direct manner that I found reassuring. "I've been working with your parents and brother for several weeks now," she explained after introductions. "But I want to be clear that my role today is not to advocate for their perspective or push you toward reconciliation. I'm here to help you assess what you want and need going forward." Her clarification of boundaries immediately put me more at ease. "I appreciate that. I'm still figuring out what healthy family connection looks like after everything that happened. That's a process, not a single decision," she affirmed. "What are your primary concerns about engaging in family therapy at this point?" I considered carefully. "I worry about slipping back into old patterns, being the accommodating one who's expected to forgive and move on while underlying issues remain unaddressed. I also worry that any progress they've shown might be temporary, motivated by the shock of legal consequences rather than genuine change." Dr. Farrell nodded. "Those are valid concerns. Family systems resist change, often pulling members back into established roles even after apparent breakthroughs. It's why sustained effort is necessary." "My mother sent me a letter yesterday," I said, indicating the document I'd brought. "It shows more insight than I expected, but trust requires more than words," she completed, showing understanding of my hesitation. "It requires consistent action over time." "Exactly. And while they've returned the money and expressed remorse, that doesn't automatically rebuild the trust they destroyed." We spoke for nearly an hour, exploring my feelings about what had happened and my uncertainty about future family relationships. Dr. Farrell neither pushed reconciliation nor advocated distancing, instead helping me clarify my own boundaries and needs. "If you decide to participate in family sessions," she said as our time drew to a close, "I would suggest beginning with clear parameters, specific topics, time limits, and explicit boundaries about what you are and aren't ready to discuss." "That makes sense," I agreed. "I'm not ready for full family gatherings or holidays yet, but I can see value in structured conversations with professional guidance. Would you like me to schedule a first joint session? Perhaps just you and your parents initially, leaving Eric for a subsequent meeting to reduce complexity?" The suggestion felt manageable, a controlled first step rather than an overwhelming plunge back into full family dynamics. "Yes," I decided. "But in a few weeks, after my house closing. I want to complete that milestone first, establish my new home as my secure space, before engaging with family issues." That's a very healthy boundary, Dr. Farrell affirmed. I'll coordinate with your parents for a session in early June, after your move. As I left her office, I felt lighter somehow, not because family reconciliation was assured, or because the hurt had diminished, but because I was approaching the situation with clarity and self-determination rather than obligation or guilt. The decision to engage in therapy wasn't surrender or automatic forgiveness. It was a conscious choice to explore whether healthier family relationships were possible while maintaining the stronger boundaries I'd established. That evening, I replied to my mother's email. Mom, thank you for sharing your letter. I appreciate your willingness to examine these patterns so honestly. I met with Dr. Farrell today and have agreed to a joint session in early June after my house closing. I'm scheduling it for June 10th if that works for you and Dad. I want to be clear that I'm approaching this as an exploration of whether we can build healthier relationships moving forward, not as an immediate return to how things were before. The breach of trust was significant, and rebuilding will take time. Sabrina. Her response came within the hour. June 10th works perfectly. We understand this is just a beginning, not an immediate restoration. Thank you for being willing to take even this step. Your new boundaries are not just appropriate but necessary, and we respect them completely. We look forward to seeing you then, on whatever terms you're comfortable with. As May progressed, my focus shifted to the practical aspects of becoming a homeowner. The mortgage process completed smoothly, inspections and appraisals confirmed. The property's value and the closing date was set for June 2nd. I began packing my apartment, donating items I no longer needed, and carefully organizing those I would bring to my new home. Throughout this process, I maintained limited but cordial communication with my family. Brief text exchanges about practical matters, an occasional update on the house progress, but no pretense that everything had returned to normal. Eric sent photos of his food truck's growing success, including a feature in the local newspaper's New Business Spotlight. My parents respected my boundaries, neither pushing for more engagement nor withdrawing completely. The rebuilding phase wasn't just about my family relationships, but about constructing a new life foundation. One based on clearer boundaries, stronger self-advocacy, and the physical security of my own home. The house represented not just a financial investment, but a symbol of reclaimed independence and self-determination. As closing day approached, I found myself reflecting on how different this moment felt from my initial house hunting experience just 2 months earlier. Then I had been the dutiful daughter who had never questioned her family's support or intentions. Now, I was someone who had faced betrayal, fought for her rights, and emerged with both her savings and a stronger sense of self. The money had been recovered, but something more valuable had been gained in the process. A clear understanding of my worth and the courage to protect it, regardless of who challenged it. That foundation would support whatever came next, whether in my new home or in the careful reconstruction of family bonds on more equal, respectful terms. June 2nd arrived with perfect early summer weather, clear blue skies and mild temperatures, ideal for a moving day. The closing process that morning was remarkably straightforward, a series of signatures culminating in the moment when the attorney handed me the keys to my new home. No dramatic flourishes or ceremonial gestures, just the simple transfer of metal that represented something profound. This place was mine, secured through my own persistence and determination. Zoe and 3 other friends formed my moving crew, efficiently transporting boxes and furniture from my apartment to the ranch house throughout the afternoon. The moving van I'd rented was less than half filled. Years of apartment living had kept my possessions minimal and practical. "This place has great energy," Zoe commented as we arranged my living room furniture. "Solid. Unassuming but confident. Kind of like you." The observation made me smile. I hadn't thought of it that way, but you're right. It's not trying to be something it's not. By early evening, the essential unpacking was complete. My bedroom was fully functional. the kitchen organized enough for basic meals, and the living room arranged for comfort rather than perfection. My friends departed with promises to return for a proper housewarming once I was more settled, leaving me alone in my new home for the first night. The silence felt different from my apartment, deeper, more encompassing, but also more peaceful. I walked through each room slowly, running my hands along walls that now belonged to me, mentally planning paint colors and minor renovations. In the master bedroom, I adjusted my grandmother's jewelry box on the dresser, a tangible connection to family heritage now secured in my own space. As I prepared for sleep that first night, my phone chimed with a text from my mother. "Congratulations on your new home. This achievement is entirely yours and we're so proud of you. Sleep well in your new space." The message was perfectly calibrated, acknowledging the milestone without inserting herself into it, expressing pride without claiming credit, and respecting the boundary that this moment belonged to me alone. I appreciated both the sentiment and the restraint it demonstrated. "Thank you," I replied simply, a small but meaningful exchange that would have been unimaginable just weeks earlier. The following days brought the gradual process of making the house truly mine. I painted the kitchen a warm butter yellow, replaced dated light fixtures with simple modern alternatives, and invested in new curtains that maximized the natural light I'd found so appealing during my first viewing. The work was satisfying, transformative but measured, improving without erasing the home's inherent character. As the June 10th therapy session approached, I found myself experiencing unexpected anxiety. The controlled, limited communications with my family had been manageable, but the prospect of face-to-face interaction in the emotionally charged context of therapy felt more challenging. Dr. Farrell had suggested a specific focus for this first session, establishing shared understanding of what had happened and the impact it had caused, without yet moving to resolution or future planning. "The goal isn't reconciliation in a single session," she'd explained during a brief phone call, confirming the appointment. "It's creating a foundation of honest communication that might eventually support rebuilding trust." The morning of the session, I deliberately wore an outfit that made me feel confident and professional. Dark jeans, a structured blazer over a simple blouse, and the pearl earrings that had been part of my grandmother's jewelry collection. Not formal enough to create distance, but polished enough to reinforce that this wasn't a casual family gathering. Dr. Farrell's office featured a comfortable consultation room with natural lighting and seating arranged to avoid direct confrontation. Armchairs, positioned at comfortable angles rather than facing directly across from each other. My parents arrived just before I did, looking both nervous and determined. My mother wore a conservative dress I hadn't seen before, while my father had chosen business casual attire rather than his usual weekend polo shirt. "Thank you all for being here," Dr. Farrell began after brief greetings. "I want to establish some guidelines for today's session. We're here to create shared understanding, not to pressure Sabrina toward forgiveness or reconciliation before she's ready. Everyone will have uninterrupted time to speak about their experience, and I ask that you listen without defending or explaining while others are sharing." My parents nodded their agreement, and my father surprised me by speaking first. "We're here to listen primarily. That's important for us to understand." Dr. Farrell turned to me. "Sabrina, would you be willing to share your experience of what happened? Not just the financial aspects, but the emotional impact as well?" Though I'd anticipated and prepared for this moment, actually articulating my feelings in front of my parents was more difficult than expected. I took a steadying breath and began. "When I discovered the money was gone, my first reaction wasn't anger but confusion, disbelief that my parents could have done this. Then came the practical panic of losing my house opportunity, followed by the deeper realization that this wasn't just about money. It was about how you see me fundamentally, as a resource rather than a person with my own needs and goals." My mother's eyes filled with tears, but she maintained the listening stance Dr. Farrell had requested, not interrupting or defending. The hardest part wasn't the stolen funds, but the justifications afterward. That Eric's needs were more important than mine. That my success made me less deserving of consideration. That my savings weren't really mine because I'm family. Those beliefs revealed a pattern I'd felt, but never fully acknowledged throughout my life. I continued detailing both the practical steps I'd taken to recover my money and the emotional journey of recognizing my own worth enough to demand its return. Throughout my account, my parents remained attentive and visibly affected, but honored the agreement not to interrupt. I'm here today not because everything is resolved, but because I want to understand if there's a path forward that includes mutual respect and clear boundaries. I don't want permanent estrangement, but I also can't return to the family dynamic that made the theft seem justified in the first place. When I finished, Dr. Farrell allowed a moment of silence before turning to my parents. Diane, Robert, what are you hearing in Sabrina's account that helps you understand her experience? My father spoke first, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. I'm hearing that we betrayed Sabrina's trust on multiple levels, not just taking her money, but dismissing her right to make her own decisions about resources she earned. And that this wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern where we valued her less than her brother. My mother nodded, adding, I'm hearing that our justifications after being confronted caused as much harm as the original action. That we compounded the financial violation with emotional invalidation. They're accurate reflection of my experience, without defensiveness or minimization, felt like the first genuine step toward potential healing. They weren't just acknowledging what they'd done, but truly understanding the deeper implications and patterns it represented. Dr. Farrell then invited my parents to share their perspective, not as justification, but as context for understanding how they had reached the point of such a significant breach of trust. My mother spoke first, expanding on themes from her written reflections. Looking back, I can see how we created different standards and expectations for our children from early on. Eric's struggles made him seem more in need of support and attention, while Sabrina's capability became an excuse to expect more from her while giving her less. She looked directly at me for the first time. We came to see your independence not as something to respect, but as something to utilize when convenient. It was wrong in ways I'm only beginning to fully understand. My father's account was more concrete, but equally revealing. When Eric's business plan seemed viable but required substantial capital, we immediately thought of your savings rather than considering other options, selling investments of our own, taking a home equity loan, or simply telling Eric he needed to find legitimate outside funding. The fact that appropriating your money was our first thought rather than our last resort shows how distorted our thinking had become. Their honesty in describing the thought process that led to the theft was both disturbing and valuable, illuminating. The family system that had made such a violation possible without recognizing it as such. The financial advisor in me knew it was wrong, my father admitted. If a client had described taking their adult daughter's savings without permission, I would have been appalled. But I compartmentalized, treating family finances as somehow exempt from normal ethical standards. Dr. Farrell guided the conversation skillfully, helping us explore the patterns without allowing blame or defensiveness to derail the process. She occasionally offered observations about family systems and the common dynamics of parentifying responsible children while enabling less functional ones. The golden child, responsible child dynamic you've described is remarkably common, she noted. What's less common is the willingness to recognize and address it directly, particularly after such a significant breach. That willingness creates the possibility for genuine change, though the process isn't quick or simple. As our 90-minute session approached its conclusion, Dr. Farrell asked what each of us hoped might be possible moving forward. I want a relationship with my daughter based on mutual respect rather than expectation, my mother said. I want to know the real Sabrina, not just the role she's played in our family system. I want to rebuild trust through consistent actions, not just words, my father added, and to support Sabrina's independence and choices rather than seeing them as resources for the family. When my turn came, I spoke carefully, wanting to be honest without either false promises or unnecessary harshness. I want to explore whether we can build new patterns of interaction based on equality and respect. I'm not ready for frequent family gatherings or holidays yet, but I'm open to continuing these structured conversations and gradually rebuilding a relationship that acknowledges, rather than repeats the past. Dr. Farrell suggested a follow-up session in 2 weeks, this time including Eric, to address the sibling dynamic that had been shaped by our parents, but now needed its own examination and potential recalibration. As we prepared to leave, my mother hesitated, then asked, "Would it be possible to see photos of your new house sometime?" "Only if you're comfortable sharing, of course." The request was made with such careful respect for my boundaries that I found myself willing to grant it. "I could email some photos once I've finished the kitchen painting," I offered. "It's coming along well." "We'd love that," my father said, matching my mother's careful tone. "Only when you're ready." We parted with brief, slightly awkward goodbyes. No hugs or declarations of love, just acknowledgement of the work we'd begun and tentative hope for its continuation. As I drove home to my new house, I felt emotionally drained, but also unexpectedly lighter, as if the honest exchange had released some of the tension I'd been carrying. The following weekend, I received a text from Eric asking if I'd be willing to meet for coffee before our joint therapy session scheduled for the following week. "No business talk or pressure," he added. "Just brother-sister catching up if you're comfortable with that." After consideration, I agreed to meet at a neutral location, the same coffee shop where we'd had our confrontation during the height of the crisis. The symmetry seemed appropriate, a chance to revisit the location under changed circumstances. When I arrived, Eric was already there, having secured a quiet table away from the main traffic flow. He stood as I approached, his greeting careful rather than effusive. "Thanks for coming," he said simply. "How's the new house?" "It's coming together nicely," I replied, settling across from him. "Different from what I initially imagined, but it feels right." "Sometimes the unexpected choice ends up being better than the original plan," he observed, a statement that seemed to carry meaning beyond home selection. As we talked, I noticed subtle but significant changes in Eric's communication style. He listened more attentively, asked genuine questions rather than waiting for opportunities to redirect conversation to himself, and spoke about his business, with realistic assessment rather than grandiose predictions. "The food truck is doing well," he said when I asked. "But we've had challenges too. The engine needed repairs last week, which cut into our operating capital. In the past, I would have immediately called Mom and Dad for a bailout, but instead, I negotiated a payment plan with the mechanic and adjusted our schedule to maximize profitable locations. This practical problem-solving and financial responsibility represented genuine growth. When I commented on the change, Eric nodded thoughtfully. "Therapy is helping, but so is your stand against the family pattern. Seeing you refuse to accept the status quo forced me to reconsider my role in it." He hesitated, then added, "I've been living off others' support for so long that I never developed the satisfaction of genuine self-sufficiency. It feels different, harder but better, to solve my own problems." As our conversation continued, Eric shared his perspective on our upcoming joint therapy session. "Dr. Farrell has been preparing me for it. She says we need to acknowledge the competitive dynamic our parents created between us and find our own relationship independent of their expectations." "That makes sense," I agreed. "We've both been playing roles assigned to us rather than relating as actual individuals." "The golden child versus the responsible one," Eric said with a rueful smile. "Except the golden child role isn't actually good for the person cast in it." It created this constant pressure to be special without providing tools for actual achievement. Meanwhile, you were developing real capabilities that I secretly envied. This admission of vulnerability and insight was unprecedented from my brother, whose facade of confidence had always seemed impenetrable. I envied aspects of your role, too, I admitted. The freedom to fail without devastating consequences. The enthusiastic support for your ventures regardless of their viability. But that freedom became a trap, Eric pointed out. I never learned from failures because they were always cushioned. Now I'm having to develop skills at 30 that you mastered at 20. This mutual acknowledgement of how we'd both been shaped and limited by our assigned family roles created a new foundation for potential connection, not as the characters in our parents' narrative, but as adults with shared history and individual paths. Before we parted, Eric handed me a small envelope. It's not much, but it's a start. Inside was a check for $500 with first repayment, written in the memo line. I know Mom and Dad returned the full amount, he explained, but some of it benefited me directly through the business. I want to take responsibility for that by repaying my portion personally, even if it takes time. The gesture wasn't about the money, which was indeed a small fraction of what had been taken, but about Eric accepting accountability separate from our parents. It represented his recognition that he had been complicit in benefiting from the theft, even if he hadn't initiated it, and his commitment to making concrete amends rather than merely offering apologies. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched by the gesture's significance rather than its amount. This means a lot. Our upcoming joint therapy session felt less daunting after this preliminary conversation. Still challenging, but with a foundation of direct communication that hadn't existed before. The redemptive quality of these encounters wasn't in erasing what had happened or instantly restoring trust, but in demonstrating genuine efforts toward understanding and change. As I drove home to my new house, still in the process of becoming fully mine through renovation and personalization, I reflected on how these careful, structured reconnections with family members paralleled that process. The foundation remained, but the interior was being thoughtfully redesigned, removing dysfunctional elements while preserving what was worth saving. The scars of betrayal wouldn't disappear, but perhaps they could become part of a stronger structure, visible. Reminders of past weakness transformed into points of conscious reinforcement. The rebuilding wasn't just of relationships, but of identity within those relationships. No longer the reliable daughter who existed primarily to support others, but a woman with clear boundaries, recognized value, and the courage to defend both. The joint therapy session with Eric proved surprisingly productive, building on the foundation established during our coffee meeting. Under Dr. Farrell's guidance, we explored how our parents' disparate treatment had shaped our relationship with each other, creating an artificial competition where Eric was set up for admiration despite underachievement, while I received minimal recognition for consistent success. The tragedy of this dynamic, Dr. Farrell observed, is that it prevented you from being authentic allies to each other. Siblings are meant to be our longest-lasting relationships, outlasting even our connections with parents. But yours was undermined by systemic imbalance. Over the following weeks, these therapeutic conversations continued, sometimes with our parents present, sometimes just Eric and me. Gradually, we established new patterns of interaction based on mutual respect rather than assigned roles. The process wasn't linear. Old habits occasionally reasserted themselves, requiring conscious redirection, but the trajectory remained positive. By August, nearly 4 months after the theft discovery, family gatherings had cautiously resumed, though with clear boundaries and expectations. My parents visited my new home for the first time, respecting my request that the visit be brief and focused on seeing the space rather than extended socialization. "You've created something beautiful here," my mother commented, admiring the kitchen I'd completely transformed with paint, new hardware, and strategic updates. Her genuine appreciation without attempting to take credit or offer unsolicited suggestions represented real progress. My father, examining the new water heater I'd had installed, nodded approvingly. Smart investment. This efficient model will significantly reduce your utility costs. That was my thinking. I agreed, accepting his professional validation without needing it to confirm my decision. The visit concluded without pressure for extended time or immediate future plans, just appreciation for being included in this aspect of my life after the serious breach of trust. Eric's food truck business continued to grow steadily, earning a dedicated following and expanding to catering private events. True to his word, he sent me monthly checks, modest but consistent, contributions toward what he viewed as his personal debt for benefiting from my stolen savings. "I don't need the money anymore," I told him during one of our now regular coffee meetings. "The principle matters more than the amount." "It matters to me," he insisted. "It's not about your need, but my accountability. Each payment reminds me to make decisions based on earned resources, not expected bailouts." His perspective showed a maturity that extended beyond our specific situation to his broader approach to life and business. The monthly checks became less about financial restitution and more about symbolic commitment to changed behavior, which I came to respect deeply. My professional life flourished in parallel with these personal developments. The position with the Small Business Advisory Group expanded my skills and visibility within the bank, leading to a promotion by early fall. My experience with family financial dynamics, once a source of pain, had transformed into valuable perspective for helping clients navigate similar challenges. Thomas, my department head, highlighted this during my performance review. "Your ability to identify potential family system issues behind business decisions has proven invaluable to several key clients. You're seeing patterns others miss because you've experienced them directly." This alchemy, transforming personal difficulty into professional strength, felt like the most unexpected outcome of the whole ordeal. The very experience that might have diminished me had instead become a source of unique insight and capability. 1 year after the theft discovery, I hosted a housewarming party that symbolized the integration of my new boundaries with selective reconnection. My home, now fully renovated and personalized, welcomed friends, colleagues, and yes, family members to celebrate not just the physical space, but the personal journey it represented. My parents attended briefly, bringing a thoughtfully chosen gift, a custom address plaque for the front of the house, elegantly crafted but not ostentatious. "Something to mark this place as uniquely yours," my father explained, the symbolic acknowledgement of my autonomy not lost on either of us. Eric arrived later with his new girlfriend, a pragmatic restaurant manager he'd met through food truck events. Their relationship seemed grounded in mutual respect rather than the dramatic, imbalanced connections he'd pursued in the past. He contributed a handmade spice rack for my kitchen, built in a woodworking class he'd been taking at the community center, another sign of his commitment to developing concrete skills rather than chasing quick success. As the gathering flowed around me, Zoe appeared at my side, observing the transformed dynamics. "Quite a different family from the one that stole your savings," she noted quietly. "They're trying," I acknowledged, "and so am I, in a different way. Not to forget or minimize what happened, but to see if something healthier can be built with clear eyes about the past." The bank manager's face when I showed the evidence of my parents' theft had been just the beginning of a journey none of us could have anticipated. What started as financial betrayal had catalyzed profound reassessment of family patterns established over decades. The money had been returned relatively quickly, but the real resolution wasn't about dollars and cents. It was about recognition, respect, and recalibration of fundamental relationships. Later that evening, as the party wound down and guests departed, I stood in my kitchen, the room I'd transformed most completely in the house, and felt a sense of completion that transcended home ownership. The savings account that had been emptied now held a comfortable emergency fund once again. The family that had betrayed my trust was engaged in genuine, ongoing effort to earn it back. Not through grand gestures, but through consistent respect for boundaries and acknowledgement of past wrongs. Most importantly, I had discovered a strength I might never have recognized without the crisis that forced its emergence: the capacity to stand firm in my own worth, to demand respect rather than accommodation, to build a life defined by my choices rather than others' expectations. These were the true assets gained through the painful experience. The meaningful resolution wasn't a single moment of forgiveness or reconciliation, but the ongoing process of building something authentic from the ruins of what had been revealed as fundamentally flawed. My parents continued their therapy, both individually and as a couple. Eric steadily developed his business and personal responsibility. I maintained my boundaries while selectively opening doors to new forms of connection. As I placed the last clean glass in the cabinet after the party, I caught sight of my reflection. In the window, confident, centered, uncompromised by others' expectations. The woman who had discovered her parents' betrayal a year ago might have shared my face, but she had yet to discover her voice. The journey from that moment to this one, from victim to advocate, from accommodator to equal participant, represented the most valuable growth of my adult life. The bank manager's shocked expression when I presented evidence of the theft had been a pivotal moment, but the true resolution lay in all that came after: the reclamation not just of money, but of dignity; the establishment not just of boundaries, but of a fundamentally new way of existing within family relationships, and the discovery that sometimes the greatest growth emerges from our most painful challenges. My parents stole $35,000 from my savings for my golden child brother. I'd still say truthfully, but now I could add the more important truth. And in fighting to recover it, I found something far more valuable: my voice, my boundaries, and my power to define relationships on my own terms. That was the meaningful resolution, not the return of funds, but the reclamation of self that no one could ever take from me again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.